Chapter 209. Grandaunt, please entertain the guests. I'm tired. Chu Luchan touched his head with his slender fingers and said slowly. Then go and have a rest. Rui, and great elder princess, stood up and was about to order someone to take Chu Luchan away. Go down and rest. Great aunt, I don't need to bother you. I'll go out by myself and wander around. If I'm tired, I'll rest there. He was very easy to talk to. Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly bowed to Rui, and great elder princess, and then glanced at Qin Wanru with a smile. Then he pushed Chu Luchan out. When they reached the door, the two old maids on both sides reached out and grabbed the wheel together. Xiao Xuanzi raised the back of the wheelchair, and the three of them lifted the wheelchair steadily. Then, there was the sound of the wheels turning, and it slowly left. Sit down. Rui, and great elder princess, sat down and pointed to the chair beside her with a smile. Qin Wanru walked over and sat down. The servant girl hurriedly served tea and then left. Xiao Yuanhao looked at Qin Wanru and then at Rui, and great elder princess. After thinking for a while, he ran to the chair on the right side of Qin Wanru and sat down obediently. How really likes you? Ryan said. The great elder princess looked at them helplessly and smiled. These two children seemed to be fated. I also like how. Qin Wanru smiled and reached out to rub Xiao Yuanhao's soft hair. Thank you again for what you did in Duke Xing's mansion. Rui, and great elder princess, said with her face darkening. What happened to Xiao Yuanhao had been reported to her by the people she sent. Of course, that person was also reprimanded by Rui, and great elder princess. Now Xiao Yuanhao had been replaced by another person, and he was led away as soon as he arrived at Duke Xing's mansion. What was the use of such a person? How is in Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Wanru thought about the wording and said, it seems that Madam of Duke Xing likes Hao very much and is willing to give in to Hao in everything. If Hao has any problems, she will also bear all the responsibilities. Her words were very implicit. Like? She doesn't even like Hao's biological mother. How could she like Hao? She is just a pretentious person. Rui, and great elder princess, snorted. Infanta and Madam of Duke Xing didn't get along well in the past. Qin Wanru asked in surprise. On the surface, he seems respectful, but in reality, he has never liked my son. Rui, and great elder princess, said, you treat my son like this. How can you like Hao? I've already known what happened that day. Although I said I would apologize for Hao without hesitation, I just pushed the blame onto Hao How could you bully such a young child? Hao is so young. Why did you do that to him? And judging from the situation that day, it doesn't seem like it happened overnight. Qin Wanru was confused. What happened that day was still vivid in her mind. She had thought about it for a long time, but found that there was no result. She knew that Madam of Duke Xing was inappropriate, but why did she treat a child like this? The title of nobility in Duke Xing's mansion had nothing to do with Hao Could it be that Madam of Duke Xing couldn't even tolerate a child without parents? Too ambitious. You actually want to control Hao Rui, and great elder princess, said coldly, with a trace of hostility in the corner of her eyes. If I know that what happened to Hao's parents is related to them, I will never let them go. It seemed that there should be something she didn't know. Qin Wanru was silent for a while. In fact, she didn't want to meddle in other people's business. She was busy with her own business, let alone others' business. Moreover, this kind of thing related to the royal family was not something that she, a weak girl, could meddle in. She reached out and touched the top of Xiao Yuanhao's head. This child looked very obedient. At this time, he just listened with a pair of big black eyes. Rui, and great elder princess, seemed to feel that her words made Qin Wanru a little embarrassed, so she changed the topic. What kind of person is the first miss of your mansion? Why did she suddenly bump into Hao that day? Hao said that she took the initiative to bump into him and overturned his ink. Yes, she did it on purpose. As soon as this was mentioned, Xiao Yuanhao twisted in the chair unwillingly and said with a pair of big eyes angrily. He even pouted his pink little mouth. He looked angry and awkward. Both Qin Wanru and Rui, and great elder princess, laughed. Okay, I believe you. Sister, you are a good person. She is a bad person. Don't let her come next time. Xiao Yuanhao was satisfied and his eyes were bright. Well, don't let her come to play. Qin Wanru comforted him with a smile. Then she turned her head and said to Rui, and great elder princess, although big sister is a little inappropriate in daily life, she would not want to offend you. Someone must have asked her to do so and they must have given her some benefits, or she thought it was a great benefit. Of course, she might not know Hao's identity at that time. Qin Wanru knew Qin Yuru's character very well. She dared not offend Rui, and great elder princess, for no reason. However, if someone hinted something to her and she didn't know Xiao Yuanhao's real identity, she would probably do something. She would not forget that when she mentioned Rui, and great elder princess, to Xiao Yuanhao, Qin Yuru's face turned pale. After that, she gritted her teeth and didn't change her words. Hinted? Rui, and great elder princess, understood and her eyes became cold. She sneered and said, this child was born with a hard life. He lost his father at an early age and his posthumous child had a difficult birth. My son also died because of this. Duke Xing's mansion refused to let me take him away with the excuse that he was their bloodline. They also said in front of others that they would treat Hao well. After that, Hao didn't want to leave, so I let him stay in Duke Xing's mansion. I didn't expect that Duke Xing's mansion had planned it long ago. It's also my negligence. If there was someone who didn't want Xiao Yuanhao to live well and wanted others to think that Xiao Yuanhao was a naughty and ignorant child, there was no one else but Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Wanru saved Xiao Yuanhao before, so Rui, and great elder princess, remembered the kindness of Qin's mansion. Then Qin Yuru deliberately bumped into Xiao Yuanhao and put all the blame on Xiao Yuanhao, a child. Rui, and great elder princess, loved this child the most, so she might vent her anger on Qin Wanru. The person who plotted in the dark could be said to have grasped the most critical point in this matter. It could not only destroy Xiao Yuanhao's reputation, but also create a gap between Qin Wanru and Rui, and great elder princess. It was really a good move. Qin Wanru never thought it was a malicious speculation about Duke Xing's mansion. In her last life, the tragedy after she entered the capital city could be said to have been driven by someone behind the scenes. Although she didn't know who it was, it must have something to do with Duke Xian's mansion. Great elder princess, do you know the reason? Because this matter was related to her, Qin Wanru asked one more question. Isn't it because of the title of nobility in his mansion? Does he really think that the title of nobility in Duke Xing's mansion can exist for thousands of years? Rui, and great elder princess, snorted coldly and banged on the table heavily. For a title of nobility, he made all kinds of gestures. Now Hao is in my mansion. That day, I went to warn the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. If they heard any bad rumors about Hao again, don't blame me for being rude. Qin Wanru's watery eyes flashed a trace of sadness. No wonder after that day, there were almost no rumors about Xiao Yuanhao. It turned out that Rui, and great elder princess, took action. Perhaps this was also the reason why Madame of Duke Xing had been quiet recently. Looking at the situation that day, Madame of Duke Xing had even thought of an excuse to visit Qin's mansion. Qin Yuru's clothes were left and the reason to visit Qin's mansion to express her gratitude. Either of these reasons could be used to visit Qin's mansion. However, Duke Xing's mansion didn't take any action. It seemed that it was just an excuse that day. But looking at the gift sent by Madame of Duke Xing today, she knew that it was not just an excuse. Today, Madame of Duke Xing sent me a gift. Qin Wanru came to the mansion to talk about this matter. She immediately fluttered her long eyelashes and said softly. She sent you a gift? Rui and Great Elder Princess said in surprise. Yes, today. She said that we hit it off and asked me to visit Duke Xing's mansion more often. Qin Wanru told the truth. Rui and Great Elder Princess looked Qin Wanru up and down. She didn't see the reason why Madam of Duke Xing thought highly of Qin Wanru. Of course, she didn't believe that Madam of Duke Xing really liked Qin Wanru because of Xiao Yuanhao. What did she send? A set of clothes and a set of jewelry. Qin Wanru said. Have you brought them? Rui and Great Elder Princess asked. Yes, they are in the carriage. Yujie, go and get them. Qin Wanru ordered. Rui and Great Elder Princess nodded and called an old maid over to accompany Yujie. When they came back, the gift box was placed on the table. After opening it, Rui and Great Elder Princess was stunned when she saw the extremely exquisite set of clothes. Colorful yarn. What is colorful yarn? Qin Wanru asked. She had never heard of it. Rui and Great Elder Princess reached out to pick up the cloth of the clothes and put it in her palm. The cloth slipped from her palm. Rui and Great Elder Princess picked up the clothes again and walked to the window. She looked at the clothes in the sunlight in front of the window. Immediately, the clothes showed an extremely colorful color, as if they were illuminated. The color became brighter and brighter, and it even seemed that there were other colors in this color. But when she looked carefully, it was just this color. It is indeed colorful yarn. This is a very rare tribute. Even in the palace, it is very rare for the concubines in the palace to want such a set of clothes. Usually, they only use this colorful yarn to make some handkerchiefs. Rui and Great Elder Princess took the clothes and sat in front of the bed again, looking at the clothes thoughtfully. Duke Xing's mansion was really generous. Chapter 210. What's the reason? Qin Wanru was shocked and couldn't help sitting up straight. Although he had long guessed that it was not simple, he did not expect that there would be such a hidden disaster. The Emperor doesn't like it. Rui and Great Elder Princess did not hesitate this time. She looked at the hanging curtain and said in a low voice. Her words were concise. This answer was out of Qin Wanru's expectation. She had thought of many possibilities, but none of them matched with this answer. It turned out that the Emperor didn't like it. As the Emperor of a country, he should be high and mighty and usually pay attention to national affairs. How could he pay so much attention to this kind of thing about women's clothes? What about this set of jewelry? After the shock, Qin Wanru did not ask again, but pointed to another gift box and said. Since Rui and Great Elder Princess didn't say it just now, there must be a reason. The secrets of the royal family had never been something that others could casually inquire about. There shouldn't be many people who knew about this matter related to the Emperor, or even if they knew, they wouldn't dare to say it. Seeing that Qin Wanru was sensible enough to stop asking, Rui and Great Elder Princess showed a trace of appreciation in her eyes. This child was indeed smart, and she knew when to advance and retreat, and knew how to make choices. Putting down the clothes in his hands, he picked up the accessories and looked at them. This is nothing. You don't need to wear clothes. Knowing that Rui and Great Elder Princess was reminding her, Qin Wanru nodded hurriedly. Elder sister, how, has something nice to look at. Elder sister will accompany how, to see it. Xiao Yuanhao, who had been sitting behind them, couldn't stand it anymore. He reached out to pull Qin Wanru's sleeves and looked at Rui and Great Elder Princess eagerly. Grandma, I want my sister to play with me. Seeing him twisting his small body like a rubber band, Rui and Great Elder Princess and Qin Wanru both laughed. Well, go and play for a while. Don't get too tired. Rui and Great Elder Princess ordered with a smile. Okay, how, will be obedient. How, will be obedient. Hearing that Rui and Great Elder Princess agreed, Xiao Yuanhao hurriedly jumped down from the chair, pulled Qin Wanru's sleeves and walked out. Qin Wanru stood up helplessly. After bowing to Rui and Great Elder Princess, she left with Xiao Yuanhao. Sister, let's go. Let's hurry up. As soon as they left the sight of Rui and great elder princess, Xiao Yuanhao became more lively. He held Qin Wanru's hand and led the way. After passing through a few winding corridors, they arrived at a garden. Sister, look, the flowers are blooming. Isn't it beautiful? Pointing at a plum tree by the door, Xiao Yuanhao said proudly. The plum tree was vigorous and the red plum blossoms on its branches were blooming. It was only the beginning of winter, yet there were actually such beautiful plum blossoms to look at. It was truly surprising. So early? Qin Wanru held Xiao Yuanhao's hand and asked in astonishment. Yes, it's early at my maternal grandmother's place. Even my maternal grandmother's place doesn't open this early. I discovered it before, and I'm waiting for my sister to come. I'm sure my sister will like it. Xiao Yuanhao's little face was white and tender, and he pretended to be an adult at this moment. Only his black and white eyes showed a little bit of complacency, and he looked at Qin Wanru with a look of asking for praise. Qin Wanru smiled and reached out to rub the top of his head. No wonder Chu Luchen liked to touch her hair before. It was really comfortable to touch her soft hair. Big sister likes it very much. How, you are so nice. You know I like it. Big sister, there are more inside. Let me take you in. Xiao Yuanhao was so happy that he almost jumped up when he was praised by Qin Wanru. Immediately, the serious look on his face fell apart, and he pulled Qin Wanru to the garden. The yard was full of plum blossoms. Some had bloomed, and some had not. They were scattered in a picturesque way, and they could be clearly distinguished. One was red, and the other was white. Along the winding path, a pavilion appeared in front of them, and there was a man in the pavilion, with his back to them. Seeing his back, Qin Wanru sighed helplessly. Chu Luchen, it was the clothes that Chu Luchen was wearing just now. She would not misplace it. Big sister, Prince Chen is here. Xiao Yuanhao stopped and said in a low voice. Seeing Xiao Yuanhao's look, Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing. It was the first time that she saw a timid expression on this child's face. This child had always been fearless, but he was also afraid of Chu Luchen. What's wrong? How, are you afraid of Prince Chen? Qin Wanru said in a low voice. She looked around and didn't know where Xiao Xuanzi was. He was not here. Yes, How, is afraid of Prince Chen. Xiao Yuanhao nodded with a tight face, and reached out to pull Qin Wanru to step back. Why are you afraid of Prince Chen? Qin Wanru was interested, and she asked in a low voice with a smile. Prince Chen wants me to study, and he wants to hit my palm. It hurts. Xiao Yuanhao looked aggrieved, and pulled Qin Wanru's hand hard. He was really afraid of Prince Chen. In the past, he was used to be the king in Duke Xing's mansion, and everyone gave in to him. Moreover, he was tempted not to study. After he came to Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion, Rui and Great Elder Princess invited him to be a teacher. Unexpectedly, he was so naughty that he ran out to play every day instead of practicing calligraphy. His teacher had no choice but to complain to Rui and Great Elder Princess. Then Rui and Great Elder Princess called him back and sent him to the study. However, Xiao Yuanhao couldn't sit still. That day, Xiao Yuanhao sneaked out of the study and met Chu Luchen. He was caught by Chu Liuchen's guards and hung directly on the tree. In the beginning, Xiao Yuanhao was stubborn. However, when no one came to save him, he was so anxious that he burst into tears. Later, when Chu Luchen put him down, he ran to the study. When he saw Chu Luchen again, he didn't dare to be presumptuous, for fear that he would annoy Prince Chen again. After all, if he annoyed Prince Chen, even his grandmother couldn't do anything. Come here. A leisurely voice came from the front, and the two people who were in a commotion were shocked. Xiao Yuanhao looked up at Qin Wanru pitifully, and lowered his voice, Sister, let's run. Still want to run? Do you want to stay on the tree for a while? A gentle voice came with a smile. Xiao Yuanhao hurriedly hid behind Qin Wanru's hand, and buried his head in her back in panic. At that time, Prince Chen had asked the guards to hang her on the tree with such a gentle voice, no matter how much she cried and made a fuss. Feeling the child's fear, Qin Wanru felt helpless. She held Xiao Yuanhao's hand and pulled him over, and then walked slowly to the pavilion. In the pavilion, the wheelchair had turned. Chu Luchen leaned against the railing of the chair, and supported his head with one hand. His posture was leisurely, with a delicate face and a gentle look. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth, and his gaze slowly fell from Qin Wanru to Xiao Yuanhao. Qin Wanru sensed that Xiao Yuanhao's little body trembled a little, and he tightly leaned against her. How, don't you want to study? Chu Luchen asked gently. Yes, I want to study. Xiao Yuanhao's little body trembled again, and he immediately stood up and said loudly. His grandmother said that Prince Chen liked children who were willing to study the most, and he couldn't let Prince Chen know that he didn't like to study. Do you want to read this book? Chu Luchen raised a book in his other hand, and asked with a smile. Xiao Yuanhao took a step back, and looked nervous. I'm still young, and I haven't learned many words. When I learn more in the future, I can read this kind of book. His grandmother said that if he didn't know how to read the book given by Prince Chen, he would be beaten. How, are you going to study now, or my book? Chu Luchen said with a lazy smile. I'm going to study now, and my teacher is still waiting for me. Xiao Yuanhao felt that he couldn't stay at this time, so he looked at Qin Wanru with a humble look, and pulled her hand. When Qin Wanru slightly squatted down, he said in a low voice, Sister, I'm going to study now, and you can ask someone to come to the study to find me. After saying this, he looked at Chu Luchen carefully, let go of Qin Wanru's hand, and ran out quickly. An old maid followed him closely, and said anxiously, Master Hao, be careful, and run slowly, or you'll fall. The voice gradually faded away, and finally, Qin Wanru was left standing at the entrance of the pavilion with a stunned look. Chu Luchen laughed, in a low voice at first, and then he laughed out loud. He even took the book in his hand and patted the armrest of his chair hard, as if the treasured book was about to fall apart. Your Highness, Hao, is just a child. Qin Wanru was very helpless, and reminded Chu Luchen helplessly, who had lost his usual elegance and decency. Scaring a child gave him such a sense of accomplishment, and she didn't know what he was thinking. Chu Liuchen's laughter suddenly stopped, and he covered his chest and coughed loudly. Qin Wanru hurriedly took 2 steps forward, and reached out to pat his back a few times. Finally, Chu Luchen stopped coughing, and his pale face became flushed because of coughing, showing an unhealthy weakness, but because of this flush, his delicate face became more and more beautiful. He raised a pair of eyes that were coughing out water vapor, looked at Qin Wanru, and his face suddenly became gloomy. He reached out to push away Qin Wanru's hand, and his face was indifferent, and his eyes were unusually shimmering. Do you think that I'm dying? Your Highness, Qin Wanru, if I die, what do you think will happen? Chu Luchen suddenly laughed again. Qin Wanru took a step back, and kept a distance from him. This was the temperamental Prince Chen. I don't know. Will someone avenge this king? Chu Luchen asked with interest, as if the gloominess at that moment was just Qin Wanru's own mistake. Your Highness, of course you will live a long life. Qin Wanru didn't understand what he meant, and answered carefully. Live a long life? Chu Luchen seemed to have heard a big joke. His thin lips curled up slightly, revealing a mocking smile. The sickly handsome young man looked a little decadent. Others may be able to live to 100 years old, but I can't. If others can, so can you. Qin Wanru didn't understand what he meant, and she blinked her eyes and asked confusedly. This king's body can actually live as long as others. Qin Wanru, you're really good at flattering. Chu Luchen smiled, and it seemed that he was in a good mood, but Qin Wanru saw that his smile did not reach the bottom of his eyes, and it was not like the unscrupulous smile just now, and she couldn't help but feel cold. Chapter 211. She inexplicably felt that Chu Luchen was very dangerous at this time. She looked back carefully, only to see Yujie standing outside the pavilion with her head down, and Xiao Xuanzi was still nowhere to be seen. In the past, Xiao Xuanzi followed Chu Luchen closely. When did he leave for so long and not come back? Your Highness, where is Xiao Xuanzi? Qin Wanru composed herself, blinked her eyes and asked. Qin Wanru, do you think I can still marry a wife? Chu Luchen ignored her question and asked leisurely. He supported his head with his hand, glanced sideways at Qin Wanru, and raised his eyebrows ambiguously. Prince can marry her. Qin Wanru didn't understand what he meant and answered carefully. Don't you feel that you are delaying her? Chu Liuchen's dark eyes were unclear. If your Highness wants to recuperate, you naturally won't hold others back. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said. When she died in the last life, Prince Qin seemed to be fine and didn't use a wheelchair. His complexion seemed to be better than now. He should be much better, right? Since he could recover in his previous life, he could recover in his current life as well. In Qin Wanru's opinion, the biggest reason for Chu Liuchen's behavior should be his mental illness. When they were in Jiangzhou, he once stubbornly refused to take medicine. Judging from Xiao Xuanzi's words at that time, it should not be a matter of a day or two. As long as Prince takes the medicine and sees a doctor well, your body will naturally get better. Qin Wanru added helplessly. Will it be as good as your face? Chu Liuchen's voice was gentle, but there was an unfathomable coldness and ruthlessness in it. He glanced at Qin Wanru's face, which was pink and white, which was completely different from his pale color. Her red lips were even more enviable. They were not only bright but also beautiful. Qin Wanru groaned inwardly. It sounded like he was throwing a tantrum, and she happened to run into the muzzle. Of course. Qin Wanru could only answer. What if I can't? Chu Luchen asked seriously. It's always possible to raise it slowly. Qin Wanru bit her lips and didn't know how to answer him. He was going to kill her with his words. Qin Wanru, I heard that you learned medicine in Jiangzhou. How about treating me? I'll just make you look like this. Chu Liuchen's expression became more and more gentle. He raised his handsome eyes, which were shimmering and harmless. No one could imagine that the sharp words just now came from his mouth. Prince Chen was not only temperamental, but also covered up his behavior with beautiful and enchanting colors. It was really hard to guess what he wanted to do. Your Highness, I just started studying medicine. Qin Wanru said eagerly. Of course, she would not ask how Chu Luchen knew about her. Even if others did not know, it was impossible to hide it from him. In his previous life, he was able to regain his position as the crown prince and suppress the other princes of the emperor. This showed that he was not as harmless as he looked on the surface. Beautiful things are poisonous. Especially this kind of extremely beautiful color, it was even more poisonous. How about I ask Imperial Grandmother to let you into the manor to treat me? Chu Luchen said slowly. His voice was so gentle that it was almost pure, as if he didn't know that it was not polite at all. Prince. Qin Wanru's voice rose unconsciously, and her bright watery eyes widened in shock. Why not? Just now, who said that he would help me live a long life, marry a wife and have children, and let me have the same bright color as you? Chu Liuchen's face darkened, and his handsome eyebrows were raised high. His handsome face showed a bit of coldness, which was chilling to the bones. Qin Wanru was so shocked that she could hardly believe her ears. Was that what she was trying to say? But at this time, if she said that she did not mean it, she must be doomed according to Prince Chen's meaning. Chu Luchen gritted his teeth. He was really too difficult to deal with. Your Highness, since you know that I study medicine, you should know that I haven't learned it for a long time, and you should also know from whom I learned it, right? Qin Wanru said thoughtfully. Not long, from Mingxiu nun of Jingxin Monastery. Chu Liuchen's answer was within Qin Wanru's expectation. How dare I treat your illness in such a short time? If you really need treatment, Mingqiu Nun's medical skills are very good. Qin Wanru's words were very smooth. On the one hand, she avoided it, but on the other hand, she did not completely avoid it. It seemed that what she said was also sincere. Mingqiu Nun. You want to recommend her to help Jingxin Monastery? Chu Luchen looked at her ambiguously and suddenly laughed in a low voice. Qin Wanru was shocked. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice. She stared at Chu Luchen closely, and her forehead began to sweat. Did something happen in Jingxin Monastery? Did something happen? This king does not know. Chu Luchen leaned back and turned his wheelchair leisurely. Then he looked at the beautiful red plum tree beside the pavilion. The flowers were bright and enchanting. Qin Wanru hurriedly turned to him and said, Prince, please help me. Is it related to me? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows. Didn't Jingxin Monastery master give you a few stalks of fragrance of July? Wasn't this the fate between Jingxin Monastery and Prince Chen? Is the Empress Dowager well? Qin Wanru forced herself to calm down, anxiously said. She couldn't remember when Jingxin Monastery had an accident in her last life, but it didn't seem to be this time. So she didn't care about it at first. But Chu Liuchen's words would not be without a target. She was in the inner court of Qin's mansion, so she was not well informed. But Chu Luchen was different. His information network should not only be in the capital city. What benefits can I get? Chu Luchen looked at her and suddenly smiled quietly. Mingqiu Nun's medical skills are the best. If Mingqiu Nun can take care of your body, you will definitely recover. Qin Wanru bowed deeply and respectfully and said, Please help me, Prince. There are many people with excellent Chinese medicine skills in the capital city, aren't there? Chu Luchen was not moved and said. At your command, Prince. Qin Wanru gritted her teeth and said sensibly. Anyway, she owed Chu Luchen a lot. If they really talked about it, she could only listen to his command. Besides, this matter was not a big deal. Too much debt to worry about, that was probably her. You said it, Qin Wanru. You can't go back on your word like you did just now. Chu Luchen was quite complacent in his words. Yes, it is what I said. Qin Wanru repeated helplessly. The glass cup. Chu Luchen suddenly said. Qin Wanru's eyes suddenly widened. She understood and said, Fenghua glass cup. People from Duke Yong's mansion. Good, you are smart. Chu Luchen felt satisfied and nodded slightly. For Fenghua glass cup, they actually want to deal with Jingxin Monastery? Qin Wanru's pink face showed anger, and she tightly rubbed the handkerchief in her hand. It turned out that Madame D did this for Fenghua glass cup. Grandma must have said that the Fenghua glazed cup was still in Jiangzhou, so she asked Duke Yong's mansion to send people to Jiangzhou to get it. Since she had given the Fenghua glazed cup to Chu Luchen, how could it still be in Jingxin Monastery in Jiangzhou? The people sent by Duke Yong's mansion must not believe it. She didn't know what kind of scheme they had used to attack Jingxin Monastery. Madame D and Duke Yong's mansion were so hateful. For their own interests, they disregarded other people's lives and involved the whole Jingxin Monastery. They actually treated people's lives like grass. What does that Fenghua glass cup have to do with her? Qin Wanru said with hatred. There were such people in the world. They were not only extremely vicious, but also took others' things for granted. They even did things that angered both human beings and gods in order to take others' things as their own. In the past, she didn't understand why Madame D and Qin Yuru treated her like this. Now she felt that there was no need to think about it at all. Some people were so vicious and cold by nature. When I went to Jiangzhou, it was Rui, a great elder princess, who asked me to find the glass cup. I didn't know if I didn't look for it, but when I looked for it, I was shocked. I found more than a dozen glass cups for Rui, and great elder princess. Chu Luchen said casually, Your one is with me, and I threw the rest to Rui, and great elder princess. So, there was no answer to this matter. She didn't know why Madame D liked it so much. It seemed that she couldn't find out anything from Chu Luchen. Can you save them? After thinking about it, the most important thing now was to save people. Yes. Chu Luchen nodded slightly. Prince, please help them. Qin Wanru was overjoyed and bowed to Chu Luchen respectfully. Qin Wanru, I'm sick. Chu Luchen stretched out his hand in front of Qin Wanru and raised his eyebrows to look at her. Qin Wanru had no choice but to reach out her hand to check his pulse carefully. Then she frowned and raised her head. Prince, you need to take good care of your body. Apart from these, she actually didn't know what to say. It was certain that Chu Luchen was not in good health. She had taken his pulse before and found that he was not well. He also had some fetal poison that was the most difficult to cure. The fetal poison from the mother's body was the most difficult to cure. This was the main cause of his illness. But even if she knew that, she couldn't cure the main cause. Can Mingqiu Nun cure it? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and said lightly, but his eyes were deep. Yes, Mingqiu Nun can cure it. Qin Wanru said sensibly. This was an opportunity and an excuse. With Chu Liuchen's identity, he certainly couldn't directly deal with this kind of thing, and he even shouldn't know it. I'll mention the abbess of Jingxi Monastery who can cure diseases and Mingqiu Nun to Imperial Grandmother. Chu Luchen was rarely easy to talk to. His eyes fell on Qin Wanru's hand that had not been released until now. His pale lips slightly raised, and it seemed that he was in a good mood. Qin Wanru was stunned and looked down. Then she found that she still held his hand tightly after feeling his pulse. She blushed and immediately put down her hand. She coughed in a low voice and was about to say something to make the scene less embarrassing. Suddenly her hand was held by Chu Luchen. He pointed to the path on the right outside the pavilion and said, "Someone is coming, push me there." Although Qin Wanru didn't hear anything, she still pushed his wheelchair as he said. He went out and pushed onto the narrow path behind the tall pines. Chapter 212. Prince Yu, this way please. Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and looked at Chu Luchen. It was Xiao Xuanzi's voice. Where is he? At the intersection where they came before, 3 people appeared. One was Xiao Xuanzi, the other was Prince Yu, Chu Luyue, and a little eunuch, who should be Chu Luyue's personal eunuch. Hey, our master was here just now. Where is he now? Xiao Xuanzi was also stunned. He looked around and found no one, and his face turned pale. Where is he going, third brother? Chu Luyue didn't panic. He just glanced around coldly and found nothing, so he asked slowly. This. I really don't know. I heard that your Highness Prince Yu is coming, so my master asked me to pick you up. This. I really don't know where he is going. Your Highness Prince Yu, please wait a moment. I will ask someone from Great Princess Royal Mansion. Xiao Xuanzi said anxiously. Chu Luyue waved his hand, and Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly left. Chu Luyue walked into the pavilion, walked around leisurely with his hands clasped behind his back, stood there casually, and began to appreciate the plum blossoms in front of him. For a long time, there was no sound in the pavilion. Your Highness, is Prince Qin not here? Do you want to go to other places to have a look? The little eunuch following Chu Luyue couldn't help but ask. It doesn't matter. Just wait. Chu Luyue said calmly. Your Highness, is it that Prince Qin left you here alone like last time? The little eunuch felt unfair for his master and said, it was the same last time. He said he would wait for you here, but he left early in the end, leaving you waiting here with an empty stomach. The little eunuch said discontentedly. It was obvious that his master was most likely to inherit the throne in the future. Why did he treat Prince Qin, who was dying of illness, so well? He was originally a crown prince who had been abolished, and it was impossible for him to have a chance to take back the throne. Even if he recovered, it was useless. What's more, he was so ill that he might die at any time. Do you think I am at a loss? Chu Luyue suddenly smiled. Yes, I feel sorry for you. The little eunuch hurriedly showed his loyalty. Others will also feel that this king has suffered a loss. Chu Luyue didn't say anything, but he was very satisfied. The smile on his face didn't disappear. It was rare to see a cold-faced prince like him in such a situation. It could be seen that he was really happy and didn't feel sad because Chu Luchen deliberately didn't want to see him. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Chu Liuchen's face. These trees were very dense. If two people and a wheelchair were hidden behind them, no one would find them. Chu Luchen closed his eyes slightly and leaned against the wide wheelchair behind him. The sunlight fell through the shadows of the trees and mottled fell on his face. His jade-like face was transparent. His long eyelashes curled up and rested on his handsome and delicate facial features, making him look like a gentleman walking out of a painting. Even though his lips were so pale, it didn't affect his appearance in the slightest. Such a person should be living in a picturesque environment. Qin Wanru inexplicably bit her cherry lips, giving birth to a few sighs and inexplicable feelings. Chu Liuyue's words had been very clear. The reason why he was so accommodating to Chu Luchen was that he deliberately did it to show others. The more Chu Luchen made it difficult for him, the more others would think of him. Chu Luchen was just a tool for him to fish for fame. Perhaps he was not only fishing for fame, but also wanted to please the Empress Dowager. It was said that the Empress Dowager liked the sick and weak Chu Luchen most. However, no one would have thought that he would be the one to obtain that position in the end. Not to mention his identity as the dethroned crown prince, with his current identity, no one would regard him as a formidable opponent. But even so, the emperor would certainly not let him go. If someone used his identity, they could still stir up a big mess. Such a person could not be caught or let go, but Chu Luyue dared to use him. Prince, you can make friends with other princes, but Prince Chen is always, the emperor may not like him. The little eunuch was Chu Liuyue's confidant, so he dared to say something, especially when there was no one around and his prince was obviously in a good mood. Father doesn't like him? Chu Luyue said calmly. Seeing that he was so calm, the little eunuch became bolder and immediately plucked up his courage to say, Prince, the emperor will definitely not like Prince Chen's identity. If you get close to Prince Chen, the emperor may. Before he finished his words, the little eunuch did not dare to say too much. But the meaning of his words had been understood. Chu Luyue chuckled in a low voice and was in a very good mood. Father won't really do anything to him. Anyway, he is dying. It's good enough for him to live for 1 or 2 years. Does he really want to live forever? Given his condition, he will die even if father doesn't do anything to him. He said this with great certainty. The little eunuch suddenly raised his head, and his face immediately turned pale. Although he was a confidant, he did not want to know some things. If he knew too much, he would die quickly. This was a fact that many people in the palace knew. Perhaps the little eunuch's shock disturbed Chu Luyue. He finally turned his head, glanced at the little eunuch calmly, and raised the corner of his mouth. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. You're this king's confidant. Could it be that this king has other confidants that are important to you? Thank you, Prince. The little eunuch knelt down with a plop and heavily kowtowed 3 times. His face became slightly better. Chu Luyue raised his hand and motioned him to get up. Then he turned around and walked out of the pavilion. The little eunuch hurriedly got up and followed him. He hesitated and said, Prince, are you not going to wait for Prince Chen? No, I've come to look for him. It doesn't matter whether I can find him or not. It doesn't matter as long as imperial grandmother and father can see him. Chu Luyue said casually. The little eunuch did not dare to answer casually and hurriedly followed him. They walked out of the plum blossom forest one after another. The pavilion became quiet again. Qin Wanru looked at Chu Liuchen's handsome face. With his eyes still closed, he looked completely harmless. Even if he didn't do anything and just leaned against the pavilion quietly, he had a natural elegance and nobility, which made him look more noble than the characters in the ordinary ink paintings. Prince. Qin Wanru whispered when she saw that he did not speak. What's the matter? Chu Luchen asked without opening his eyes. This. Prince Yu has left. Although she did not think that it was impossible for Chu Luchen not to hear it, Qin Wanru still said this. So what if he came? So what if he left? His leisurely voice was a little cold and dignified. Qin Wanru could not help but feel shocked. She did not know what others thought of him, but at least in her eyes, Chu Luchen would never be simple. Such a character, even if he was sick and weak, could also control the weather. How could he be really innocent and harmless? If so many people really thought so, it could only be that Chu Liuchen's expression was too deceptive. Qin Wanru found that he knew what kind of expression to show at any time. It was far beyond the moodiness. How many people in this world could control their moods and make others think that they were truly temperamental and that they were just being willful? Capricious moodiness, extremely sick and weak, coupled with his occasional innocence, who would regard him as a strong enemy? It seemed that except for being sick and weak, everything else was secretly controlled by him. Inexplicably thinking of something, she could not help but feel shocked, and the hand that was pushing the wheelchair unconsciously moved. What's wrong? Do you feel sorry for me? Chu Liuchen's eyes opened at some time and fell on Qin Wanru coldly, as if an extremely sharp and light sword cut through this empty place. There was a kind of coldness that made people feel creepy. Qin Wanru looked down and met Chu Liuchen's eyes. She did not avoid his eyes and said, "Your Highness is not pitiful, but Prince Yu is pitiful." After saying this, she felt even more scared. This kind of feeling should be the same as Chu Liuyue's little eunuch just now. She did not want to say it, but if she did not say it, she would inevitably be pushed to the position of Chu Liuchen's confidant. If not, there was only a dead end. In fact, she did not want to take this road, but after hearing Chu Liuyue's words just now, she knew that she could not escape. Chu Luchen would not let her go. Just like that little eunuch, if he did not become Chu Liuyue's most confidant, he would only die. He knew too many secrets, so what if he did not die? But what puzzled her was that her position was not the same as that of the little eunuch. Why did Chu Luchen recruit her as his confidant, and what did he want her to do? She felt cold in her hands and feet, but did not show it on her face. Her eyes were calm and firm. She was a person who had died once, so how could she be frightened by this step that had to be taken? No matter what, she had to go down this road step by step. Oh, why do you say that? Chu Luchen smiled and slightly raised the corner of his mouth. He liked to see Qin Wanru tell the truth. Honesty was the minimum requirement, wasn't it? Especially for a person like her. Prince Yu thought that he could make use of Your Highness, but in fact, Your Highness is also making use of him. Qin Wanru's voice was very light, so light that she almost could not hear it clearly. She bit her lips, and her lips turned red. She actually felt very calm, so calm that even she was surprised. How could she think that this was originally normal? Perhaps she had already thought of this possibility when she made a deal with Chu Luchen, and everything at the moment was just a matter of course. Chu Luchen was not a person who was easy to get along with. When in Jiangzhou, he seemed to have been giving and not asking too much from her. But now he seemed to be asking for something from her, right? Chapter 213. Then how do you think we should deal with him? Chu Luchen said lazily, his eyes falling on Qin Wanru's face. Qin Wanru closed her eyes to hide the trace of serenity in her eyes. She opened her eyes again and looked at Chu Luchen quietly. She said bluntly, "Prince, I don't know. I'm just a weak girl, I don't know many things." Chu Luchen stopped talking. He tilted his head slightly and seemed to be looking her up and down. Qin Wanru didn't say anything. She pursed her lips stubbornly and looked straight at the handsome and harmless face in front of her. He was so gentle and aloof. Who could think of his black-bellied and powerful strength? Qin Wanru, do you know what you just said? Chu Luchen suddenly laughed and touched his chin playfully. I know. Qin Wanru nodded without hesitation. Perhaps, she had already known this a long time ago. Chu Luchen looked at her this time and suddenly said meaningfully, good, this is very good. Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes, and Chu Luchen's figure could be seen in her clear eyes. I will deal with the Jingxin Monastery master. This was Chu Luchen's affirmation to her. She felt relieved. Even if she had given Fragrance of July to Chu Luchen before, she didn't know whether he could repay her with this favor. But now Qin Wanru felt relieved. The appearance of Xiao Xuanzi helped Qin Wanru out of trouble. After bowing to Chu Luchen, Qin Wanru turned around and left. Seeing Qin Wanru leaving in a hurry, Chu Luchen withdrew his gaze and looked down thoughtfully. His long eyelashes fell like a tired butterfly, very beautiful, but also very relaxed. Master. Prince Yu has gone back. Will the Empress Dowager think you are unreasonable? Xiao Xuanzi reported. It was rare that his master was in a good mood and relaxed. He was still very willing to see it. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at the place where Qin Wanru disappeared. Chu Luiyue thinks that no one can understand his mind. There are many smart people in the world. Chu Luchen said lightly. His extremely long eyelashes cast a strange shadow on his white, almost transparent face. But when he raised his eyes, he looked gentle, as if he was looking at a completely different scene from what he saw just now. That extremely handsome face seemed to know when to use the right expression to control the hearts of others. He was smiling. Xiao Xuanzi, who had been with him for a long time, could sense that his smile did not reach his eyes. It was a completely different feeling from the relaxation just now. Master, if second Miss Qin didn't say that, you would. Xiao Xuanzi stammered. He didn't know if it was because Chu Liuchen's face was too relaxed just now, or it was because he saw Chu Liuchen's sudden defense that made him laugh too hard. In fact, he had been here for a while. He had walked through the hidden place on this road with his master, so he heard the conversation between Chu Luchen and Qin Wanru. Since it has fallen into my hands, it belongs to this king. No one can take it away from me. Chu Luchen stretched out a slender hand. His skin was also pale. Looking at his palm, he slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said with a faint smile. The inexplicable chill made Xiao Xuanzi shiver involuntarily, and the next words almost came out of his mouth. If second Miss Qin didn't say so just now, you wouldn't have dealt with her. After saying this, Xiao Xuanzi immediately understood and knelt down abruptly. Master, please forgive me for speaking recklessly. Since she has appeared, she doesn't have to go. Chu Luchen ignored Xiao Xuanzi, and his eyes fell on his palm softened. There are not so many ifs in this world. If she belongs to me, she can't escape. Chu Liuchen's voice was also almost gentle. After a long time, he raised his head and slightly raised his hand, motioning Xiao Xuanzi to stand up. Xiao Xuanzi stood up numbly and looked at Chu Luchen in a daze. A trace of tears flashed in the corner of his eyes. He might be happy for his master, but was it really okay for him to be so stubborn? Perhaps second Miss Qin could be the sunshine in his master's heart and pull him out of the eternal darkness. After Qin Wanru left Chu Luchen, she went to find Xiao Yuanhao. Xiao Yuanhao was practicing calligraphy in the study. When he saw Qin Wanru, he stopped practicing and pushed the paper in his hand away and ran out. Sister, has Prince Chen left? Xiao Yuanhao looked behind Qin Wanru and was relieved when he didn't find Chu Luchen. Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing. This child was not afraid of anything. She didn't know why he was so afraid of Chu Luchen. Everything had its vanquisher. Prince Chen is not here. I came to tell that I'm going back. Sister, don't go. I haven't played with yet. Xiao Yuanhao was reluctant, twisting his little body and pouting his little mouth. How many words have you written? Qin Wanru blinked her watery eyes and smiled leisurely. Hao told me before that when you grow up, you want to be like your father and finish writing the screen wall. It was left to me by your father. Xiao Yuanhao couldn't say anything. He lowered his head and stamped on the ground twice to show his dissatisfaction. When Hao writes 100 pieces of paper, I will come to play with Hao At that time, even if Prince Chen is here, he will not say anything. Qin Wanru touched his head and smiled. Really? Prince Chen will not care about Hao's business. Hearing that Chu Luchen would not care about him, Xiao Yuanhao's eyes lit up. He raised his head and looked at Qin Wanru with a look that he wanted to get a positive answer from her. Yes, Hao has been studying hard. Prince Chen will certainly not say anything. Even if he sees Hao playing with me, he will not do anything. Qin Wanru coaxed him. Okay. Xiao Yuanhao hesitated and said helplessly. Thinking of Prince Chen's face, he couldn't help shivering. He was really afraid of seeing Chu Luchen. Last time when he was hung up, he cried and complained to his maternal grandma, but his maternal grandma ignored him. Later, when he returned to Duke Xing's mansion, he also took the opportunity to complain to his grandmother. However, his grandmother and second aunt, who always defended him, said that they could not control Prince Chen's business and asked him not to provoke Prince Chen. Xiao Yuanhao, who couldn't complain, immediately became obedient and didn't dare to make trouble in front of Chu Luchen. If there was someone he was most afraid of now, it would be Chu Luchen. There was no one else but him. After talking with Xiao Yuanhao for a while, Qin Wanru went back with Yujie to say goodbye to Rui and Great Elder Princess. Rui and Great Elder Princess gave her some cloth, which was not only for her, and asked her to distribute it to others in the mansion. After thanking Rui and Great Elder Princess, Qin Wanru went out with Yujie and got on her carriage. The carriage turned all the way out of the gate of Great Elder Princess's mansion and went to Qin's mansion. When they arrived at the mansion, the carriage stopped. Qin Wanru asked two servant girls to take the gifts and went to see Madame Dowager first. Coincidentally, Qin Yuru and Di Yan were also there. Since they got engaged in a hurry, they almost always went together when they came to the inner courtyard. They looked very harmonious and seemed to have forgotten what happened to Ning Kaixian before. After Qin Wanru went forward and bowed to Madame Dowager, she asked the servant girl to put the gifts on the table. The bolts of brocade were so beautiful that they dazzled everyone's eyes. Grandma, these are the gifts that Rui and Great Elder Princess asked me to send to you, Qin Wanru said with a smile. Qin Yuru stepped forward first, reached out to pick up a piece of brocade, and gently stroked the embroidered brocade. At first glance, she knew it was a good thing. Even in Duke Yong's mansion, it was hard for her to see such a gorgeous material, but now there were several bolts piled up here. Rui and Great Elder Princess must have given them to you. Since she has given them to you, you can take them. Most of them are for young girls. How can I use such young materials at my old age? Madame Dowager said with a smile as if she didn't see the greed in Qin Yuru's eyes. Grandma, they are really sent by Rui and Great Elder Princess, but some of them are for you. Grandma, just accept them. Qin Wanru said with a smile. Then you can choose first. Take as many as you like. Anyway, it is Rui and Great Elder Princess who originally thanked you. Madame Dowager was clear about the matter and certainly knew the reason why Rui and Great Elder Princess expressed her gratitude. She immediately said to Qin Wanru with a smile. Grandma, since it is Rui and Great Elder Princess kindness, how can I refuse? If Great Elder Princess knows it, she will think that you don't like her gifts. At that time, it will not be good to make Rui and Great Elder Princess angry. Let me help you pick some suitable ones first. Qin Yuru rolled her eyes and continued Madame Dowager's words. She had picked a few that she liked just now and pulled them all to her hand. Grandma, do you think the ones I picked are beautiful? Such beautiful materials were all sent by Rui and Great Elder Princess. Many of them should be tributes. Even if one had money, one couldn't buy them. Why did Qin Wanru pick all of them? Compared to her, she was the elder sister. Moreover, her current identity was not ordinary. Of course, she could choose the ones in her grandmother's hands. Di Yan frowned. Although he was a jerk, he could see clearly in this matter. He walked to Qin Yuru and reminded her in a low voice, Rue and great elder princess sent these gifts to thank cousin Wan. However, Qin Yuru didn't listen to him at all. She looked up at Madame Dowager and seemed to listen to her. Yuru, let Zhuozhuo choose first. This is the gratitude of Rue and great elder princess. Madame Dowager's face darkened and she said lightly. Qin Yuru's face changed. She glared at Qin Wanru angrily and pushed the few pieces of materials in her hand out fiercely. She retreated angrily. Because she pushed too hard, 2 pieces of materials fell to the ground and made a heavy sound. Everyone's eyes fell on the materials involuntarily and then turned to Qin Yuru's face. Oh, I hit them too hard. It's really careless. Qin Yuru put a fake smile on her face and patted her sleeves. She couldn't hide the jealousy and hatred in her eyes. Qin Wanru walked over to pick up the 2 pieces of materials on the ground and put them on the table. Then she pulled out a few pieces of materials and turned to Madame Dowager with a smile. Grandma, I want these pieces. Chapter 214. The pieces of cloth that Qin Wanru chose were the ones that she had picked out just now. You. Qin Yuru was so angry that she almost jumped up. She moved her feet and was about to step forward, but was stopped by Di Yan. Don't you want to pick a few more pieces? They were originally given to you by Rue and great elder princess. It doesn't matter even if you take all of them. Madame Dowager said gently. Just these pieces. The rest are all grandma's. Qin Wanru said generously. Yujia came over and moved these pieces to the table on the other side. At this time, there were still about half of them left on the table. Yuru, grandma is old, and I don't need such gorgeous materials. Come over and pick 2 pieces. Besides, pick 2 pieces for your mother. Zhuozhuo will also pick 2 pieces for your mother later. Madame Dowager said kindly. Qin Wanru had so many pieces, but she only had 2. Qin Yuru was so angry that her face turned pale. She was the daughter of the legal wife of this mansion and the biological daughter of her father. How could an outsider bitch dare to take her place and step on her head? Grandma, since these are all found by my second sister, I don't need them. Qin Yuru couldn't control her sarcasm and said. Yuru, these were originally given by Rue and great elder princess to thank your sister. It's normal for your second sister to take more. If you think it's not enough, just pick 4 pieces. Madame Dowager said with a headache. She just wanted to make peace. Qin Yuru had caused a lot of trouble. Madame Dowager just wanted her to stop for a while in case she caused more trouble. Although Di Yan and her had been engaged, Di Yan was a little happy to see her like this. Even if he had to marry Qin Yuru in the end, he was afraid that they would not be happy together. Although Madame Dowager was old, she had experienced a lot of things. She knew that Di Yan entered the inner court and followed Qin Yuru everywhere. It was obvious that he was forced. Old Madame of Duke Yong and Duke Yong had a lot of power. If Qin Yuru didn't behave well, she would make Di Yan hate her. At that time, she would suffer. Thank you, grandmother. I won't stand on ceremony then. Qin Yuru said coldly. With the brocade that Qin Wanru had picked out, she would not like whatever old grandma did or said. She squinted at old grandma, took a few steps forward, walked to the table, and started to pick out the brocade. She even pushed the unselected material to the side. Qin Wanru was standing there, and those pieces of material hit her heavily. If Yujia hadn't pulled her quickly, Qin Wanru would have bumped into those pieces of material. Second sister, I'm so sorry. I was too excited when I heard that I could pick a few more pieces, so I used too much force. Qin Yuru still pretended to be so fake that it made people's teeth hurt. Qin Wanru calmly stepped back again and again, ignoring her. Qin Yuru felt as if she had punched a piece of cotton. She became more and more displeased. She randomly picked 4 pieces of cloth and helped Madame D take 2 pieces before leaving. Old Grandma looked at the 2 pieces of cloth left on the table and sighed silently. Now she could only wrong Shui Rulin and give her these 2 pieces. Come on, send these 2 pieces of cloth to Madame Shui. Old Grandma ordered. Yes. Nanny Duan answered and went to clean up. Grandmother, I have a lot of cloth here. I can send 4 pieces to my mother. These 2 pieces of cloth are actually quite suitable for you. Qin Wanru reached out to stop her. She walked to another table, picked a few pieces of cloth and asked Yujie to bring it over. How can you do that? You only have 6 pieces in total. If you give Rulin 4, you will only have 2 left. Old Grandma reached out to stop her. Grandmother, 2 pieces are enough for me. I can't wear more pieces in a short time anyway. Qin Wanru raised her clothes coquettishly. Because of her fast growth, the slightly long sleeves that were made before were now just right. Old Grandma had said that the clothes did not fit her before. Seeing her sleeves, Madame Dowager couldn't help laughing. Her kind eyes fell on Qin Wanru, and she didn't refuse anymore. She nodded and said, then give your mother 4 pieces first. I'll make them for you later. She grew fast during this period, but it would not be so fast after a while. At that time, she could find the cloth to make for Zhuozhua. Grandmother, why does Madame Shui have 4 pieces of cloth, but my mother only has 2? Qin Yuru was unhappy again and raised her eyes. The smile on old Grandma's face faded and her eyes fell on the servant girl behind Qin Yuru. There were also 6 pieces of cloth, 4 of which belonged to Qin Yuru and 2 of which belonged to Madame D. Although Qin Wanru had chosen first, the total number of cloth was the same as Qin Yuru's. But even so, Qin Yuru was still not satisfied. She frowned and really did not like Qin Yuru, who was as greedy as Madame D. Cousin Yu. Di Yan reminded Qin Yuru in a low voice again. Even he could see it clearly, but Qin Yuru did it so obviously. In fact, even if Qin Wanru didn't give them anything, it didn't matter. Originally, it was Rui and Great Elder Princess's gratitude, but Qin Yuru still refused to rest after taking a lot. Big sister, these are originally my cloth. I want to show filial piety to my mother. What's wrong with this? Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru naturally and said with cold eyes. Madame Shui is your elder, and my mother is also your elder. My mother has raised you for so many years. How can you favor one and discriminate against the other? Qin Yuru rolled her eyes and said. Her words sounded very reasonable. If it were not for the situation of Qin's mansion, Qin Wanru's current approach was indeed a little wrong. Since Madame D was the legal wife, naturally, she should not be less than Shui Rulin. But the situation of Qin's mansion was completely different from that of other mansions. Big sister, if my father thinks that I should give Madame D cloth, I will give all these to Madame D. Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru leisurely and said something that made Qin Yuru's face flush with anger. Qin Yuru's face not only turned red, but also turned green and white. Madame D's power in the Qin's mansion was now gone because of Qin Wanru. Moreover, because of what happened when Madame D asked Qin Wanru to take care of the sick, Qin Huayong ordered Madame D to draw a line with Qin Wanru so that Qin Wanru could ignore Madame D. This is actually another way of proving Madame D was wrong. Second sister, please be careful with your words. At least mother has brought you up. Qin Yuru said through gritted teeth. Big sister, thank you for your correction. Please tell Madame D. Qin Wanru said with little effort. Qin Yuru was so angry that she couldn't say a word. Others might not know what Madame D had done, but she knew it clearly. Qin Wanru meant that she couldn't see what Madame D had done for her, which also meant that she knew everything that Madame D wanted to deal with her. Grandma, we are leaving. Gritting her teeth, Qin Yuru glanced at Qin Wanru viciously and said goodbye to old grandma. All right. The old madam sighed and agreed. Even if she wanted to protect Qin Huayong, the only bloodline, it seemed that Qin Yuru would not appreciate it. Madame D had not only harmed her, but also raised her daughter to be like this. Old grandma felt very uncomfortable. Qin Yuru turned around and walked out with hatred. She didn't want to stay here for a moment. As long as she saw Qin Yuru's face, she wanted to scratch that delicate face. Di Yan bowed to old grandma and hurriedly chased after her. At the gate of the courtyard, Di Yan caught up with Qin Yuru. Cousin Yu, how can you do this? This is old grandma's place. Although Di Yan had no sense of propriety when it came to women, he was also a son of an aristocratic family who grew up with rules. When he saw Qin Yuru's behavior just now, he felt that there was something wrong. Cousin, what do you mean? Do you really like that bitch? Why are you speaking up for her? She has bullied me and my mother to such an extent. Qin Yuru suddenly exploded and shouted loudly. Looking at the frightened servant girls and old maids around, Di Yan felt very embarrassed. He looked around and pulled Qin Yuru to the gate of the courtyard. Cousin, did I hit the nail on the head? Cousin Yu and Cousin Yu, both of them are good. Before, I only saw that Cousin Yu was very good. Now I see that this little girl has grown up. It's not bad to be a loving cousin. Qin Yuru wanted to shake off Di Yan's hand and said sternly. How could the previous matter be easily forgotten? Ning Caishian's matter had always been on her mind. Sometimes, she almost couldn't control herself and wanted to rush to Ning's mansion to give Ning Caishian a few hard slaps. But her maternal grandmother and mother actually told her that it was not a big deal. They said that Di Yan was still young and this matter could be forgotten. In Di Yan's opinion, he would thank her for her magnanimity. In Qin Yuru's opinion, Ning Caishian's matter had already passed. It was impossible for Duke Yong's mansion to marry Ning's mansion. Qin Yuru agreed on the surface, but in fact, she had never really let go of the knot in her heart. Now, being provoked by Qin Wanru and Di Yan's repeated pulling, she directly vented her anger on Di Yan. Cousin Yu, what do you mean? Di Yan's face turned pale with anger. He didn't want to mention this matter at all and even thought that it would be better not to mention it in the future. Before, Duke Yong had already told him about the various disadvantages of this matter. Ning Caishian's reputation had been ruined and it was impossible for her to become his legal wife. Besides, marrying her would do him no good at all. Even though he still had some affection for Ning Caishian, it was not enough for him to put everything aside and be with Ning Caishian. If Qin Yuru hadn't mentioned it before, Di Yan would have thought that although Qin Yuru didn't do well in some aspects, at least she was very generous and gentle to him. But now Qin Yuru couldn't help saying this. He found that Qin Yuru had always kept it in her heart or was waiting for the right opportunity to get even with him. For a moment, he was annoyed. Seeing Di Yan's face, Qin Yuru immediately came to her senses. Her face turned pale and she panicked. Di Yan snorted coldly, turned around and strode away. Cousin. Qin Yuru was anxious and hurriedly chased after him. Unfortunately, Di Yan left resolutely and didn't mean to wait for her. After running for a few rods, she could only see his back. Qin Yuru was so anxious that her eyes turned red. She panted and stamped her feet hard. She turned around viciously. She was not done with Qin Wanru. Chapter 215. Qin Wanru went to Shui Rulan's yard. After coming out of Madame Dowager's yard, she went to Shui Rulan's yard. Shui Rulan was getting more and more pregnant. Even if she dealt with affairs, she often dealt with them in her yard. Madame Dowager had exempted her from morning and evening meditation, but she still went to see Madame Dowager from time to time. Originally, she was raised by Madame Dowager, so her relationship with Madame Dowager was naturally better than that of others. When Qin Wanru came over, she was leaning against the window and looking at the account book. Hearing Qin Wanru's voice, she raised her head with a smile and was about to sit up. Qin Wanru hurriedly stepped forward to stop her. Mother, I am not an outsider. You can lean against the window. How about going to Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion today? Shui Rulan did not refuse. She pushed the account book aside and asked with a smile. Not bad. Rui and Great Elder Princess's master is very good. Qin Wanru asked Yujie to put a few pieces of cloth on the table. These are all sent by Rui and Great Elder Princess. Mother, pick 4 pieces of cloth. Hearing that Qin Wanru asked for Rui and Great Elder Princess's reward, Shui Rulan's smile turned into joy. Everyone in the capital city knew what it meant to be rewarded by Rui and Great Elder Princess in the capital city. She gently patted her hand and said, I am like this now. I don't need to wear new clothes. You can take all of them. They were originally rewarded by Rui and Great Elder Princess. With the identity of Rui and Great Elder Princess, she would certainly not reward Qin's mansion for no reason. It was for the sake of Qin Wanru. Shui Rulan was originally a sensible person. She could clearly see the meaning of Rui and Great Elder Princess, so she was naturally unwilling to pick the things that originally belonged to Qin Wanru. Mother, even if I make clothes now, I will soon not be able to wear them. They are not suitable for me to make clothes. Qin Wanru raised her sleeves and said. The sleeves, which were neither too long nor too short, had grown out a while ago. When Shui Rulan made clothes for Qin Wanru, she originally wanted to make them just right. Qin Wanru specially asked the old maid in the sewing room to make them a little longer. Now the clothes were just right for her to wear. Looking at her sleeves that were neither too long nor too short, Shui Rulan immediately thought of this matter and could not help but laugh. Even so, you still have to make clothes. You're growing faster now, but you won't be able to grow so fast after a while. I'd better make it for my mother first. My mother can't wear the previous clothes, so I have to make a few more sets of clothes. Anyway, I have clothes, so I'm not in a hurry to wear them. The previous sets of clothes are specially made a size bigger, so they are almost the same, Qin Wanru said. Well, leave it with me. Have you sent it to Yuru? Seeing that she repeatedly wanted to give the cloth to her, Shui Rulan no longer refused. She thought that she could keep the cloth and ask someone to measure Qin Wanru's size when making clothes in the future. As for Qin Yuru, she was at least the first miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion, so she had to treat Shui Rulan fairly on the surface. Shui Rulan's attitude towards Madame D and Qin Yuru was different. She could ignore Madame D, but she had to take care of Qin Yuru. After all, Qin Yuru was the only descendant of Qin Huayong. Big sister has already picked one, and grandma made the decision to let Madame D pick 2. But big sister was very angry when she left, saying that Madame D only had 2, but mother had 4. Qin Wanru blinked her eyes and said. Yuru even wants to fight for this kind of thing now. Shui Rulan said in surprise. She also watched Qin Yuru grow up, and thought that Qin Yuru was very generous before. But since Qin Yuru's reputation in Jiangzhou was ruined, she seemed to have changed into a different person. She was not only mean but also vicious, almost the same as Madame D. Now she could be regarded as the future young Madame of Duke Yong's mansion, but she was still so narrow-minded, which really made people feel speechless. Of course she will be angry. She wanted to choose first before, but then grandma let me choose first, and I took away all the pieces of cloth she chose first. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said slyly, as if pointing out something. So, she's angry and wants to argue with you? Shui Rulan frowned and softly warned her, Wanru, be careful. Yuru will not suffer for nothing. Mother, don't worry, I know. Qin Wanru smiled and slightly raised the corner of her mouth. Her original intention was to irritate Qin Yuru. With Qin Yuru's temperament, she would definitely vent her anger on Di Yan. Although she knew that Qin Wanru was not as weak as she looked, Shui Rulan was still worried. After specially warning her for a few more words, Qin Wanru agreed and left one by one. Shui Rulan also asked the servant girl to bring some pastries to Qin Wanru. Recently, she didn't eat much. Her servants tried their best to make some pastries that looked, smelled, and tasted good for her. Originally, she wanted to send some to Qin Wanru. Coincidentally, Shui Rulan came over, so she asked Qin Wanru to bring some pastries to Qin Wanru. In the past few days, whenever she made something delicious, Shui Rulan would leave some for Qin Wanru. The servant girl followed Qin Wanru and Yujie to Zhifang Pavilion. On the way, she suddenly met Qin Yuru's servant girl, Mei Yan. Seeing Qin Wanru coming over, Mei Yan, who was holding a soup cup, stood on the side of the road and bowed to Qin Wanru respectfully. This servant greets second miss. Qin Wanru glanced at the soup cup in her hand and nodded slightly. Yujie walked past her with 2 pieces of cloth in her hand and curiously glanced at Mei Yan. When the last servant girl walked past Mei Yan was about to turn around and leave. As a principal servant girl, she certainly didn't need to give way to an ordinary servant girl. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden change. Mei Yan didn't know what she stepped on, but she slipped and fell on the servant girl. The servant girl subconsciously stepped back and wanted to avoid Mei Yan's body. Unexpectedly, Mei Yan wanted to stabilize her body and reached out to grab the servant girl's hand, and the soup cup in her hand was poured directly on the servant girl. The soup in the cup was still very hot, and it was poured on the servant girl. The servant girl screamed in pain and threw away the things in her hand. She reached forward and grabbed Yujie's hand. Yujie reacted quickly. When the servant girl grabbed her hand, she swung it hard. The servant girl staggered and fell heavily on the ground, and the pastries in her hand were all thrown on the ground. Mei Yan beside her was also embarrassed. Some of the soup was also spilled on her, and a few pieces of pastries were smashed on her head. Qin Wanru stood still and looked back. She looked at the 2 people who fell on the ground indifferently with an unclear look in her eyes. Yujie walked over and stood in front of her with a vigilant look. What a coincidence! Mei Yan, what's wrong with you? Yujie said with an unkind look. I'm sorry, second Mississippi. I slipped and hit someone. It's all my fault. Please forgive me, second miss. Mei Yan sat up in a panic. Regardless of her embarrassment, she hurriedly knelt to Qin Wanru and begged for mercy. Qin Wanru frowned and looked at Mei Yan. She waved her hand and turned around to leave. Mei Yan seemed to want to make up for something. Looking at the pastries overturned on the ground, her eyes lit up, and she said, Second miss, the kitchen has also made the pastries. I'll go and get some for you now. The kitchen also has pastries. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the exquisite pastries on the ground. They were made by Shui Rulan in the small kitchen. Yes, there are. Madame saw that Madame Shui liked them, so she asked the kitchen to make more. There are also a lot of pastries in the kitchen, Mei Yan said. No need. Qin Wanru shook her head and turned to leave. Thank you, second miss. Thank you, second miss. Seeing that Qin Wanru didn't intend to pursue it, Mei Yan was overjoyed and kowtowed to Qin Wanru twice. Seeing Qin Wanru leave, she pulled the servant girl's hand and got up. She wore thick winter clothes and didn't burn her face. Although the servant girl was uncomfortable, she didn't dare to really target Mei Yan and had to pull her up. You are Madame Shui's servant, right? Go and change your clothes first. Then go to the kitchen and get some other pastries for second Mississippi. Mei Yan wiped the crumbs on her face with a handkerchief and said. Yes. The servant girl didn't dare to refuse. She immediately picked up the crumbs on the ground and turned to leave. It would be the best if she could get another one for second Mississippi, otherwise, she would delay Madame Shui's matter. After the servant girl changed her clothes, washed up, and stood in the big kitchen, there was a pastry prepared. It was similar to the one Shui Rulan used before, but there were several kinds of pastries that were more exquisite than those Shui Rulan used, and the flower-shaped ones were more beautiful. The servant girl had never seen such a beautiful style, so she couldn't help asking a few more questions. Knowing that it was made with a set of new models in the big kitchen, she couldn't help but want to please Madame Shui. Originally, Madame Shui didn't use many pastries now. If she could get the set of models in the big kitchen, Madame Shui would definitely use more. After inquiring about it, the servant girl first sent a pastry to Qin Wanru. Then she returned to the kitchen and asked the people in the big kitchen to get another one. She wanted to show the old maids who made pastries in the small kitchen. If they thought it was good, she could go to the big kitchen to get the model and make it herself. The pastries that Shui Rulan made now basically didn't use the ingredients in the big kitchen. When the servant girl sent the pastry over, Qin Wanru asked Yujie to take it, and then sent the servant girl back to report to Shui Rulan. The pastry did look good. Not only did it look good, but the plate was also exquisite. The aroma made people want to eat it. With such a rich fragrance, not to mention attracting people, even other things would be attracted to it. Thinking of this, her watery eyes became more and more deep. She looked down and heard that Madame D brought a cat from Duke Yong's mansion and raised it in the mansion recently. This plate looked a little familiar, but she couldn't see it clearly because it was covered by the pastry. After looking at it carefully, Qin Wanru reached out, but was stopped by Yujie. "Miss, this is the pastry sent from the big kitchen. I want to see this plate." Qin Wanru smiled slightly, reached out to push Yujie's hand away, took away the pastry on the side, and stacked it, revealing one side of the plate below. The exquisitely painted plate made people's eyes light up. The peonies were in full bloom, accompanied by green leaves, and butterflies fluttered among the flowers. She stretched out her hand and touched the patterns printed on it. Suddenly, a trace of deep hostility flashed in her eyes. She had seen this set of exquisite pastry plates before and had a deep memory of it. Chapter 216. In her previous life, this plate, or rather, this set of plates, had appeared in Madame Dowager's place. When Madame of Duke Xing came to the mansion that day, when Madame Dowager received her, she used this set of plates with pastries and fruits. How did Madame of Duke Xing scold Madame Dowager? She would never be able to forget how the old mistress, whom she had always relied on, had knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness despite her serious illness. That scene had dazzled her eyes. At that time, although she had knelt beside the old mistress, she could not help but want to argue. However, her grandmother's cold hand had held her tightly. After Madame of Duke Xing left, Madame Dowager calmly told herself to wrap up this set of plates, send them to Madame D's room, and return them to Madame of Duke Xing, because she heard that this set of plates was originally Madame of Duke Xing's dowry and was a royal gift. The old mistress was panting and her face was as pale as snow. It was as if it had happened just yesterday. Her grandmother's health was deteriorating day by day. There was no doubt that Madame D's plot was involved, but it should also be related to this matter. Grandma, who had always been kind and gentle, had to humiliatingly kneel to Madame of Duke Xing and beg for mercy for the safety of the whole mansion. Unexpectedly, Madame of Duke Xing's belongings had appeared in Qin's mansion so early in this life. As expected, Madame of Duke Xing had intervened in this matter. However, in the last life, Madame of Duke Xing intervened in this matter through Madame D. Now it seemed that the relationship between Madame D and her was not as harmonious as in the last life. This also reminded Qin Wanru that Madame D and Madame of Duke Xing should have known each other for a long time, not after they moved to the capital city as she had thought before. A trace of coldness flashed through her deep watery eyes, but the smile on her face became brighter. It seemed that Madame D wanted to use this plate to plot against her this time. That's good, I can help him with his plan. Go ask the kitchen. I like this plate. Is there anything else? If you don't have one, bring me a similar one. Qin Wanru said that there should be no other plates, but she was afraid that there would be other plates flowing out. Qin Wanru felt that she had to be careful. Miss, I'll go right away. Qing Yu chimed in. Qin Wanru nodded and Qing Yu left in a hurry. Yujie, ask Nanny Zheng to come here. Qin Wanru ordered after looking at the plate carefully. Nanny Zheng was now Qin Wanru's servant. She taught Qin Wanru the etiquette and helped Nanny Yu to tidy up Jifang Pavilion. She was not always with Qin Wanru. Yu Jia answered and left. After a while, she invited Nanny Zheng over. Qin Wanru had asked the servant girl to replace the previous plate. Nanny Zheng, have a look. Do you recognize this plate? After Nanny Zheng entered the room, Qin Wanru pointed at the plate on the table and said. Nanny Zheng walked over, took it over, looked at it against the sunlight in the window, and said with certainty, Miss, this is for the royal use. There's even a secret mark of the palace on it, so it should be a reward from the palace. When did the general's estate receive such a reward? No reward. Qin Wanru shook her head. How could there be such a thing if there's no reward? Nanny Zheng's face changed dramatically. It was impossible for the royal gift to suddenly fall from the sky. If one was not careful, it could even bring a disaster to the whole family. I don't know where it came from. The kitchen sent this plate here. I just asked Qing Yu to find it and see if there are other plates. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to the window, looked at the sunlight outside, narrowed her eyes and said. But why did it appear in Qin's mansion? Nanny Zheng had been in the palace for a long time. Of course, she knew that this kind of thing could not be given away casually. Every royal gift was worshipped as a family heirloom. How could it be scattered outside like this? It may have something to do with Madame. Qin Wanru said. Madame is also from an aristocratic family. Doesn't she know that it will be a big deal? Nanny Zheng's face darkened. If something really happens, Madame can't bear it alone. Or she is not very clear. Of course, it is also possible that someone gave her a guarantee. Qin Wanru said coldly. In the last life, Madame of Duke Xing and Madame D used this to control her grandmother and forced her to kneel down. Or there were some deals that she did not know about. Later, this matter was not publicized, so no one knew there was such a thing. In the last life, she had always wondered why her grandmother was so secretive about her family background. Did it have something to do with this matter? For this kind of thing, not only the one who uses the royal gift will be guilty, but also the one who loses it will be guilty. Nanny Zheng heard some other meaning from Qin Wanru's words. After thinking for a while, she reminded Qin Wanru. Even the one who loses it will be responsible. Qin Wanru turned around and said slowly. Yes. Since the royal gift, any mansion should attach great importance to it. If it is really lost, of course, it will be a big crime. Nanny Zheng was very clear about this kind of thing. After thinking for a while, she said with certainty. Therefore, at that time, her grandmother's so-called apology was only used to suppress her grandmother. It was not only her grandmother but also Madame of Duke Xing herself who was guilty. It was just that Madame of Duke Xing bullied her grandmother and put all the blame on her, so that her grandmother was forced to kneel down and ask for forgiveness. There was coldness in her eyes, but the smile on her face became more and more gorgeous. Her white and tender fingers gently tapped on the table for a few times, and then she raised her head and asked Nanny Zheng, if the plate is broken, what will be the crime? A light punishment will be flogged, and a heavy punishment will be death. Nanny Zheng said with a stern face. This plate looks like it is going to break, right? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on the plate calmly. The very small lines were hidden behind the exquisite patterns. If one did not look carefully, he would not be able to see them. It did not seem to be newly broken. She raised the corners of her mouth and showed a sweet smile. It was very elegant, but inexplicably made people feel a chill in their hearts. Mother, what's the use of asking Mei Yan to send that plate to Qin Wanru? She deliberately snatched the material I picked, and did not treat you as an elder. She deliberately made cousin and I unhappy, and let cousin scold me. Mother, I want that bitch to die. Sitting in Madame D's room, Qin Yuru looked at Mei Yan who came back to report and said impatiently. At this time, Madame D looked very calm. She waved her hand, and other people in the room left, except for Nanny Zhou. Let Nanny Zhou tell you. Madame D said. First Miss, don't worry. This is a gift from the Emperor. Not everyone can use it. Now a plate is sent to Second Mississippi. If one of them is broken, Second Miss can't pay for it even if she gives up her life. Seeing that there was no one else in the room, Nanny Zhou said proudly. What, a royal gift? Although Qin Yuru had never seen it before, she had heard of the meaning of the imperial gift. She immediately stood up from the chair in shock, and her face turned pale. Mother, if something happens, will we be implicated? Don't worry, this is given by your aunt. Nothing will happen. As long as we don't say anything, no one will know. It's okay. Madame D comforted Qin Yuru with a smile. When she first heard it, she was also shocked. Fortunately, after Countess Yong explained, she was relieved. Moreover, this is a betrothal gift from your aunt. It is not a private gift. When you get married, you will still bring it to Duke Yong's mansion. It can be considered as a justifiable move. That is given to me by my aunt. Then why did she give it to that bitch Qin Yuru? Does her dirty hands deserve to touch such a respectable thing? Hearing the origin of the plate, Qin Yuru breathed a sigh of relief. After sitting down again, she said unhappily. I just lent it to her temporarily, not really. Madame D said with a smile. Since that day when she came back from Duke Yong's mansion, her depressed mood had improved a lot. Her mother and sister-in-law both agreed to this marriage, and sister-in-law, who originally did not agree with this marriage, helped her come up with such an idea. However, she just came back at that time and did not take any action for the time being. Today was a good time. What if it breaks? Qin Yuru was still worried. In her heart, this set of exquisite plate was hers. It will be better if it breaks. If it breaks the royal gift, she will pay with her life. Madame D sneered and said viciously. This was one of her original purposes. But will it be okay for us if it breaks? Qin Yuru did not understand these things, but she had some doubts in her heart. She stared at Madame D and asked. It doesn't matter. We came from a good place. This set of plate was placed in your room before. It was Qin Wanru who liked this set of plate. You told her that this was a royal gift and she could not borrow it randomly, but she just said that she would borrow it for a day and come back the next day. If it breaks, who can blame? If something happens, if she doesn't pay with her life, who else will pay for it? Madame D said proudly. She also felt that what her sister-in-law said before was reasonable. What she did before was a little too hasty. Otherwise, things would not have come to this point. If she had gotten her sister-in-law's advice earlier, she would not have fallen into this situation. Except for Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan, if the old woman was disobedient, she could kill her. She still had a sachet made from the powder of Qingxiu grass. Of course, she took it with her when she came to the capital this time. It was just that the old woman had been guarding her strictly recently, and she was sick, so she couldn't go to the old woman's place. So, the old woman could live in peace for a few days. After the two young ones were dealt with, she could deal with the old woman easily. Then how to make her break the plate? Qin Yuru was very tempted, so she rolled her eyes and said hurriedly. Did she get a few pieces of cloth from Rui and Great Elder Princess? Madame D said with a gloomy smile. Yes, several pieces. She said she would give 4 pieces to Shui Rulan. I think they are all her own. She just said it in a nice way. She really thinks that I can't see it. Qin Yuru said with hatred. She was so angry that she came to discuss with Madame D to deal with Qin Wanru. She had not settled her own affairs before, so she did not have much energy to deal with Qin Wanru. Now her marriage was settled and she got what she wanted. Naturally, she would not let Qin Wanru go. Chapter 217. The brocade was still on the table, and the pastries were still on the table. The cat jumped in from nowhere and jumped on the table. When Qin Wanru's 2 maids rushed over, the things on the table had been messed up. The pastry crumbs were stuck to the brocade, and the brocade was scratched with a few holes. It could be said that the room was in a mess. The cat jumped a few times briskly, and actually jumped to the window while the people were pouncing on it. It picked up its paw and licked it. "Quick, catch it, it broke Mrs. Brocade." "I can't catch it. It jumps too fast." It broke the plate." "What should we do?" "It's okay. The plate is not a big deal. But the brocade is in trouble. The brocade has been sent to our mansion. Even if it's broken, it should be okay." The rough maids and old maids outside the room heard the sound of several senior maids in the room while panting and discussing. They all looked at each other. Did something happen? At the gate of the courtyard, Chin Yuru walked slowly with a group of people. When she arrived in the courtyard, she saw a group of dumbfounded servants and heard such a big noise in Chin Wanru's room. She could not help but look serious and asked unhappily, "What's going on? What's the noise?" "First miss, there is a cat in second miss's room. It broke the brocade and the plate," an old maid hurriedly reported. "Brocade? The brocade given by Rue and great elder princess?" Chin Yuru's face changed when she heard it. I don't know." The old maid was shocked and hurriedly said. "Plate, what plate?" Di Fenglan followed behind Chin Yuru and asked coldly at this time, "Cousin, is it the plate that my mother sent to you as a betrothal gift?" "That is a royal gift." "What?" Chin Yuru's face turned pale. Her body shook and she almost fell. No way. "Cousin I can't be real, can I?" Di Fenglan was anxious and strode forward, facing Chin Wanru who came out of the room. "Chin Wanru, why did you take my cousin's stuff? It's a royal gift. You not only took it but also broke it. You should pay with your life." Di Fenglan said furiously. "Miss Di." Chin Wanru looked at Di Fenglan, who was gnashing her teeth in anger, and her eyes fell on her face with some hesitation, as if she really couldn't recognize who she was. "Second sister, did you really break things? My plate and the brocade sent by Rue and great elder princess?" Chin Yuru hurried over at this time, looking flustered. Beside her was another miss whom Chin Wanru had never seen before. She was beautiful and outstanding. She frowned and looked at Chin Wanru unkindly. At first glance, Chin Wanru knew that she was not a nice person. "Big sister, do you know this cat?" Chin Wanru smiled slightly, ignored her question, and pointed at it. He pointed at the cat that was still sitting by the window. "I don't know what kind of cat this is, and I don't know where this stray cat comes from. It's you who broke it. It's your fault. I'm going to tell my father now. I can't make a decision on this matter." Chin Yuru said and turned to leave. "Big sister, don't you want to know where this cat comes from?" Chin Wanru asked calmly. "Chin Wanru, you still have time to ask where this cat comes from when you are in such a situation. Don't tell me you want to push the blame to a cat. What does a cat know?" Di Fenglan scolded harshly. She suffered a loss in Chin Wanru's place that day, and had been locked up in the mansion for a period of time. She finally had such a chance to come out, and Chin Wanru was in trouble. Of course, she would not let her go. "Big sister, I heard from my mother that Madame D has recently raised a cat. I don't know if it is this cat." Chin Wanru said with a smile. "Even if it is a cat raised by my mother, do you really want to blame this thing on a cat?" Chin Yuru's face changed slightly, and she said angrily. Even she did not notice this thing about this cat. Unexpectedly, Chin Wanru noticed it. "Is this cat the one raised by Madame D?" Chin Wanru said with a smile. "How do I know? Come and ask my father to come here. Tell him that second miss borrowed a plate from me. Now she not only broke the plate, but also tore the brocade given by Rue and great elder princess." After calming down, Chin Yuru turned to order the old maid who followed her. Even if Chin Wanru knew this cat was raised by her mother, so what? Could she blame this thing on her mother? The old maid took the order and hurried to Qin Wanru's study. I borrowed a plate from big sister. When? Qin Wanru blinked her eyes, grasped the key point in Qin Yuru's words, and asked. Qin Wanru, if you didn't borrow a plate from my cousin, how could her plate be in your hands and broken by you? Di Fenglan sneered and strode to Qin Wanru's room. Qin Yuru and another miss snorted at her and also rushed into the room. The mess in the room had not been cleaned up. There were broken plates and cakes on the ground, 2 pieces of brocade that were torn, and several pieces of porcelain. Yujie and Qiu Yu were cleaning up in a panic, but when Di Fenglan rushed in, they had not finished cleaning up. Seeing people coming in, both of them were stunned. Seeing so many people rushing in, the cat at the window was so scared that it jumped to the ground, and then stretched its waist directly to the top of the opposite wall. After a while, people could not be seen. Seeing that the cat was scared away, Qin Yuru's eyes showed a trace of complacency. There were many similar cats in the world. Even if Qin Wanru must point out that it was her mother's cat, she must have evidence. Well, Qin Wanru, you still say that you didn't break things. Look at this plate, it is obviously the plate given by our mansion. Di Fenglan pointed at the fragments on the ground and said loudly. In fact, she had seen that set of plates once or twice, and the fragments in front of her looked like it. First Miss Qin, your mansion's second miss is really audacious. How dare she do this kind of thing? Any kind of imperial object is recorded. Whoever breaks it will have to bear a big responsibility. Another miss who followed them shook her head and looked at Qin Wanru with contempt. Second sister, you, how dare you? Qin Yuru looked panicked and reached out to point at Qin Wanru, as if she was too shocked to say a complete sentence. Qin Wanru looked at these people who were acting enthusiastically without changing her expression. She slightly raised the corner of her mouth and walked over. She calmly ordered the 2 servant girls who were still cleaning up, Yujie, Qingyue, clean up the things. Since they are broken, just throw them away. Hurry up and serve tea to these ladies. Yes, miss, we will be ready soon. The 2 stunned servant girls hurried to speed up, as if they were going to clean up the evidence. Qin Wanru, don't move. Do you really think you can hide such a big thing? Di Fenglan was so angry that she laughed and sneered. Hide what? Qin Wanru said lightly, it was nothing big, but Big Sister and Miss D brought people here aggressively, as if they knew something must have happened here. I want to ask why Miss D and Big Sister come here at this time. You are so presumptuous. Seeing Qin Wanru being so disrespectful, Di Fenglan raised her eyebrows and said, kneel down and ask for forgiveness. How dare you? Miss D, I really don't understand what you are talking about. Why should I kneel down and ask for forgiveness? And what does Big Sister's plate mean? What did I do with that plate? Qin Wanru looked at Di Fenglan calmly, and then slowly turned to Qin Yuru, and sneered, Big Sister, you are not deliberately trying to plot against me, are you? Qin Wanru, don't go too far. Di Fenglan was so angry that she was about to tremble. She had always looked down on Qin Yuru, not to mention Qin Wanru. She never expected that one day she would be ridiculed by Qin Wanru. I went too far, Miss D. You and Big Sister plot against me. Do you mean to destroy the imperial object? In this case, kneel down and ask for forgiveness. Qin Wanru suddenly stopped smiling and said coldly. She took a step forward and stared straight at Di Fenglan. You bitch. Di Fenglan did not expect that at this time, Qin Wanru would use her own words to fight back so fiercely, and she was so shocked that she took a step back. Di Fenglan immediately screamed and reached out to slap Qin Wanru's face. Yujie had already been prepared. She took Qin Wanru a step back and happened to avoid Di Fenglan's hand. Second sister, apologize to cousin. Qin Yuru said with a pale face. Apologize? Big Sister came here so aggressively with so many people. Isn't it because you want to get hold of my weakness? It's strange. How could Big Sister have the foresight to know that something happened here? I haven't cleaned up yet, but you brought such a large group of people to block me. Miss D, keep saying that I have committed a big crime, and Big Sister means that I borrowed a plate from you. How can I have such a big face to borrow the imperial object from Big Sister? Qin Wanru sneered and stared at Qin Yuru with a pair of bright watery eyes that seemed to be burning with raging flames. Second Miss Qin, you are really unruly as rumored. But in the current situation, you can't just be unruly. Seeing that Qin Yuru was so angry and annoyed that she couldn't even say a word, the miss who came with them hurriedly stepped forward to help her out. She sneered and looked at Qin Wanru, curling her lips and said, I haven't been in the capital for a long time, and I haven't met anyone. I also behave well in front of others. How come this miss has already heard the rumor? I don't know where the so-called rumor came from. Big Sister said it or Miss D said it, or this miss likes this kind of gossip the most and eavesdropped it. Even if this miss didn't look for Qin Wanru at this time, Qin Wanru would look for her. Since she came with Qin Yuru and Di Fenglan, her purpose had been impure. She was fearless, of course, not afraid of what this miss said. You. This miss was sharp-tongued, but her face turned blue and white after hearing Qin Wanru's words. She was so angry that she trembled. You really have no manners. How dare you speak like this? Do you think that our mansion has no manners? This miss who specializes in listening to rumors is really well educated. Qin Wanru retorted sarcastically. Second sister, you. Chapter 218. The miss was the most embarrassed one. How could she come to someone else's mansion and say such harsh words, and let the elders of the mansion hear it? She blushed and lowered her head, twisting the handkerchief in her hand fiercely. But she also realized that she was just an onlooker at this time, and it was wrong of her to intervene rashly. Without batting an eyelid, he took a step back and gave the space to the Qin sisters and Di Fenglan. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart, which was almost out of control. She looked at Qin Wanru with some vigilance. Just now, she unconsciously let second Miss Qin affect her emotion, and even made her angry. Father, second sister borrowed a plate from me. Son, now this plate is broken, but when I lent it to her, I reminded her again and again that this is a plate bestowed by the emperor and told her to be careful. She said that she would only borrow it for a day, but now it's broken. What should we do? Seeing Qin Huayong coming over, Qin Yuru loosened her grip. She immediately complained. In a breath, she immediately came up to complain. This was originally discussed by her and Madame D. Anyway, she said that she lent it to Qin Wanru. Even if Qin Wanru did not admit it, there was no way to prove it. It was a fact that the plate was broken in Qin Wanru's hands, and Qin Wanru could not deny it even if she wanted to. Even if her father loved Qin Wanru in the past, he had to push her out this time. Breaking a royal gift was equivalent to the crime of deceiving the emperor, and her father could not bear this responsibility. Royal gift? As expected, Qin Huayong's face changed dramatically, and his eyes fell on the pile of debris. Yes, it's a royal gift. It's my mother's betrothal gift to my cousin. She specially sent it to my cousin and told my aunt and cousin that it was a royal gift. But now it's smashed by second Miss Qin, and second Miss Qin doesn't admit it. She even wants to shift the blame to my aunt and cousin. This is a matter of life and death. How can my aunt and cousin bear the responsibility? Di Fenglan immediately stepped forward and said. Is this true? Qin Huayong's face was very ugly, and his eyes fell on Qin Wanru's face severely. Father, this is not true. Seeing Qin Huayong looking at her, Qin Wanru said calmly. How can it not be true? I'm not the only one who saw it. Everyone in this yard saw it. When we came over, the things in your room were smashed. Are you blaming us? Qin Yuru screamed. Hearing what she said, Qin Huayong's expression became even uglier. The veins on his forehead were bulging. Qin Wanru was very calm, and there was no change in her expression. She bowed sideways to Qin Huayong, stood up, and pointed at Qin Yuru. She said, "Father, today I came back from Mother's place, and Mother gave me some pastries, which were made in her small kitchen." On the way, Mei Yan, who was next to Big Sister, knocked over the pastries. Later, in order to apologize, Big Sister sent a similar plate of pastries, saying that the main kitchen imitated Mother's meals these days. The pastries are very fragrant, and attracted a cat, which broke the plate with the pastries and tore 2 pieces of brocade. Then Big Sister came here with Miss D and this lady, saying that I broke the plate given by the royal gift and tore the brocade given by Rue, and great elder princess. And the cat that escaped just now seems to be the one that Mother recently brought from Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru narrowed her watery eyes, which were as sharp as a knife, and said, "I really don't know why so many coincidences fall into our mansion. Even if I am guilty, with my age, Father will also be charged with the crime of not strict discipline, right? Father has just become an official, and it is the time for him to develop his great career." Unexpectedly, someone wants to frame Father. Everything indicated that someone had framed Qin Huayong, and it was not only Qin Wanru who had been framed, but also Qin Huayong. In this way, this was no longer a fight in the inner court, but a fight in the imperial court. Qin Huayong had always valued his official career. If it was really related to his official career, he would definitely pay attention to it. Hearing her words, Qin Yuru immediately knew that it was not good. There was a trace of panic in her eyes, and she hurriedly said, "Father, don't listen to second sister's nonsense. If it is not someone who wants to frame you, how can it be related to you, Big Sister? Do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand? Father has just arrived in the capital city, and he has been given an important task. There are a lot of people who are jealous of him. Before, your marriage with Duke Yong's mansion couldn't be fixed, but now Father's appointment has been fixed. Isn't this not enough to show Father's importance?" Qin Wanru sneered and rudely interrupted Qin Yuru's words. Di Fenglan's lips trembled, and she bit her lips, with a trace of embarrassment in her eyes. The reason why her mother so quickly agreed to the marriage between Qin Yuru and her elder brother was certainly because of her uncle. "Uncle-in-law, let's not talk about this now. No matter whether someone wants to harm you or not, in this situation, someone has to bear the responsibility. We can't let uncle-in-law bear it all alone. Even uncle-in-law can't bear the crime of deceiving the emperor." Di Fenglan's reaction was fast. After a little embarrassment, she hurriedly changed the topic. Qin Huayong's eyes slid across the faces of several people, and his expression became colder and more severe. Being swept by his eyes, Qin Yuru, Di Fenglan, and that miss involuntarily lowered their heads. Only Qin Wanru was still smiling, as if she didn't know she had caused such a big trouble. Qin Huayong's heart moved slightly, and his expression became a little softer. "Wanru, did you really smash the imperial gift?" "Father, how dare Wanru smash the imperial gift?" Qin Wanru said. "Qin Wanru, you are talking nonsense. This is the imperial gift of our mansion," Di Fenglan said loudly with an extremely bad face. "Miss D, now our 2 mansions are going to have a marriage alliance, and we are relatives. If our mansion is not good, what good will your mansion get? Why did you spare no effort to frame Father?" Yu Jie took out the plate, and at the same time, "I want Miss D to ask clearly. What do you mean by putting the blame on our mansion indiscriminately? Is Duke Yong's mansion not satisfied with my big sister?" Hearing Qin Wanru's order, Yu Jie entered the inner room, carefully took out a delicate plate, and respectfully presented it in front of Qin Huayong. "Father, please have a look. This is the plate that Mei Yan, eldest sister's maid, asked someone to send here. Nanny Zheng thought it was a royal gift and asked me to put it away first. Otherwise, it must be the plate that was broken. And I can't explain it clearly even if I have a mouth all over my body, because eldest sister and the 2 misses happened to come over and saw it," Qin Wanru said with a calm expression. Qin Huayong took the plate, walked to the window, and put it under the light. After seeing the Imperial Palace's logo clearly, he breathed a sigh of relief. If the plate was really smashed, it would be hard to explain, just as Qin Wanru said. He turned back and looked at Qin Yuru sternly. Yuru, what the hell is going on? Qin Yuru and others couldn't believe what they heard. After looking at Di Fenglan, Qin Yuru couldn't help saying in a trembling voice, Father, let me see. Why was there a plate? You have to take a closer look. Qin Huayong said coldly and handed the plate to Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru held the plate with trembling hands and put it under the light. She looked at it carefully according to the method that Madame D had taught her before. She almost couldn't hold the plate in her hand. It was really the imperial gift. She looked at the debris on the ground with dull eyes. What was it on the ground? Big sister, I don't know what you're thinking. You're my big sister, and we're both father's daughters. Even if we don't get along, it's a matter between us sisters. It's just a small dispute. I'm still young, and so are you. Girls are petty, so it's not a big deal. But how could you do such a thing today? If the plate is really broken, don't you think father will take the responsibility? Qin Wanru said coldly with disappointment in her eyes. Qin Yuru looked at Di Fenglan and then looked at Qin Huayong, but found that she couldn't say a word. She pointed at the debris on the ground and then pointed at Qin Wanru. Her body softened and fell down. Qin Huayong caught the plate quickly and ignored Qin Yuru. He looked at Qin Yuru with disappointment in his eyes. He could tolerate a selfish daughter, but not a stupid one. Mei Shui reacted quickly. She hurriedly held Qin Yuru and took a step back to stand firm. She shouted anxiously, Miss, first miss. Is this plate a betrothal gift from your mansion? Qin Huayong ignored Qin Yuru and looked at Di Fenglan and asked sternly. It's our mansion's. Di Fenglan stuttered as she hadn't recovered from the shock. It was beyond all of their expectations. Didn't they say it would definitely be broken? At that time, they could say whatever they wanted. Why did they find that the plate was actually intact now? Is your count's mansion dissatisfied with my mansion? That's why you did such a thing. Qin Huayong swung his sleeves coldly and said, I can't talk to you. I'll go and talk to Duke Yong. I don't know how I offended you, so that you spared no effort to deal with our mansion. Qin Huayong was really angry this time. There was no politeness in his words. The killing intent from the battlefield seeped out from his cold voice. Di Fenglan and the young lady turned pale. They each took a few steps back before they could stand still. The vicious aura of a general that was tainted by the blood of the battlefield was not something that two weak girls like them could resist. Uncle, this is really a betrothal gift from our mansion. Di Fenglan still murmured, with a smile that was uglier than crying on her face. Fortunately, second miss changed the plate. But just now, second miss didn't say anything, so we really thought that the plate was broken. Di Fenglan was so flustered that she didn't know what she was saying. Things had changed so much that she couldn't recover for a while. Father, look here. Qin Wanru stepped forward and pointed to the plate in Qin Huayong's hand. Chapter 219. This is the betrothal gift from Duke Yong's mansion to Yuru. Why didn't I know there was such an important thing? Qin Huayong asked sharply. Putting the plate on Madame D's table, Qin Huayong looked at her with gloomy eyes. General. Madame D stood up in a panic. My sister-in-law sent it here. I wanted to tell you about it, but I didn't see you. This was originally a trap. Although she was flustered, Madame D could still keep it under control. Where's the betrothal gift list? Qin Huayong was not so easy to fool, and his face showed unprecedented gloominess. It's not finished yet, my sister-in-law said it would be sent here in 2 days. Madame D twitched and said hurriedly. Your Duke Yong's mansion is really generous. Not only do you have the imperial gift as a betrothal gift, but you even send it out without a list. In this case, is it considered that Duke Yong's mansion has lost the imperial gift? That is a crime of deceiving the emperor. Qin Huayong looked at Madame D coldly and said word by word. Madame D was so scared that her face turned pale, and she twitched again. She felt as if she was immersed in cold water, and she murmured, "Isn't it in our mansion? How can it be calculated without a list?" Qin Huayong was so cold that his eyes fell on Madame D. His eyes were as sharp as a sword, cutting through her disguise mercilessly. "Madame D, if something happens to this plate, Qin's mansion will certainly be in trouble, but Duke Yong's mansion will also be finished. The so-called century-old family is actually very fragile, especially your Duke Yong's mansion doesn't have the emperor's favor now." "General, Madame D was so shocked that her eyes went blank. She had never seen Qin Huayong being so rude to Duke Yong's mansion. Thinking of the feeling of being on the verge of death that day, she couldn't help shivering. She held the handle of the chair and hid behind him. "Since Duke Yong's mansion wants to deal with me, don't blame me for being ruthless." Qin Huayong seemed to not see the trembling in Madame D's eyes, sneered, and turned to leave. General. Seeing Qin Huayong leave decisively, Madame D hurriedly rushed over, hugged Qin Huayong's leg, and screamed. Qin Huayong stood still and looked at her coldly. His eyes were cold and ruthless. "Madame D, it was you who schemed to send the plate to Wanru, right? I heard that the cat was also raised by you, right? And the pastries are similar to Rulan's. It seems that you have been plotting for a long time. If you really schemed against me this time, Wanru naturally won't end well, nor will I, and your Duke Yong's mansion can't escape. Madame D, I really don't know whether you are really stupid or not. At that time, I will divorce you, and Duke Yong's mansion won't take you in." "No." Madame D begged with a trembling voice. "General, I didn't know. I didn't know it would be like this. Sister-in-law gave it to me. This plate has been broken, and there is a crack left from before. You sent this plate here to put the blame on others, not only on Wanyu, but also on the whole Qin's mansion. If something happens to Wanru, Yuru said that the plate was originally in her hands, and Wanru borrowed it. If something really happens to Wanru, she can't escape. You are such a good mother. You really did a good job to push your own daughter into the abyss." Qin Huayong looked at Madame D with disgust, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. How could he not be disgusted? This matter seemed simple, but it was not. How stupid was Madame D to dare to do such a thing? Looking at the crack hidden in the pattern, he had already figured out the cause and effect. Madame D felt a chill in her heart, her throat tightened, and her heart was cold. She subconsciously tightened Qin Huayong's robe, and her whole body was trembling. If what Qin Huayong said was true, she really couldn't absolve herself from the guilt even if she died 10,000 times. She just wanted to hurt Qin Wanru and kill this little bitch. She didn't mean to hurt Yuru and Qin Huayong at all. Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law said, "This matter, it doesn't matter." Madame D almost squeezed out these few words. Her face was full of tears, and she looked at Qin Huayong imploringly. She said it doesn't matter, and you listened to her? You are now a member of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Madame D, Countess Yong doesn't have any interest in Qin Yuru, right? I don't need to tell you what she is thinking. If something happens to our Qin's mansion, Yuru's marriage will be over. You are such a good mother, but you pushed your own daughter into the abyss. Countess Yong will thank you. Qin Huayong attacked Madame D mercilessly. He kicked Madame D hard, and then turned and strode away. He didn't say another word. But this silent deterrence made Madame D more flustered. She choked and shouted loudly, "Nanny Zhou, Nanny Zhou." When Qin Huayong came in, Nanny Zhou was driven out. At this time, hearing Madame D's cry, she hurried in, saw her fall on the ground, and hurried to help her up. "Nanny Zhou, my sister-in-law wants to hurt me and doesn't want Yuru to be her daughter-in-law, right? Madame D grabbed Nanny Zhou, as if she was grabbing a life-saving driftwood. Madam, why do you say so? Nanny Zhou turned pale with fright. Is it that my sister-in-law wants to hurt me and doesn't want Yuru to be her daughter-in-law? Madame D still grabbed Nanny Zhou, as if she wouldn't let her go without an answer. Madam, how could Countess Yong want to hurt you? How could she not want First Miss to be her daughter-in-law? Isn't the heir of the Duke living in our mansion every day? How could it be like what you said? Nanny Zhou just hid far away, so she didn't hear the conversation between Qin Huayong and Madame D. At this time, she was still on Countess Yong's side. There are cracks on the plate, there are old cracks on the plate. Madame D suddenly turned around, rushed to the table, picked up the plate on the table, and looked at it with panic in her eyes. Her heart was now turned upside down. She didn't know whether Nanny Zhou was right or Qin Huayong was right. Subconsciously, she wanted to find some evidence. Her mind was very chaotic at this time, and she was almost panic-stricken. She couldn't listen to anyone's words. She wanted to find evidence. The consequences that Qin Huayong just said were too terrible, so terrible that she dared not believe in the family she had believed in for so long. Of course, her daughter was the best. How could Countess Yong not like her? She even did something else because she didn't like her daughter. She held the plate in her hand and shone it against the sun. An old trace appeared on the edge of the delicate pattern. It was very ingenious. It was the pattern of a flower. But if you looked carefully, you could still see that it was an old pattern. Madame D's face became pale without a trace of blood. Her body shook and she almost fell. Nanny Zhou saw that and hurriedly reached out to support her. My sister-in-law is so vicious. Madame D gritted her teeth with hatred. There was really a crack. Since this thing was given to her by her sister-in-law, Madame D didn't believe that she didn't know about it. But she still sent the plate to her and helped her set up a plan to trap Qin Wanru. She only said that she would deal with Qin Wanru and trample that bitch under her feet. But she didn't say that the plate already had a crack and it would break sooner or later. She put the blame on her. How could she put the blame on her? According to the general's plan, if this really happened, not only Qin Wanru would be finished, but also Yuru would be finished. Moreover, it would also affect the general's career. After following Qin Huayong for so many years, Madame D certainly knew what Qin Huayong cared about the most. In the past, even if she plotted against Qin Wanru and tried to kill her again and again, she always tried to avoid this matter. But now she was set up by her sister-in-law and almost ruined the general's plan. Madam, how can you say that about Countess? Countess is really good to you. She prepared whatever you wanted for you. Even if you wanted a plate from the royal family, she gave it to you without hesitation. Nanny Zhou didn't understand the huge waves in Madame D's heart. She thought that Madame D was possessed, so she hurriedly persuaded her. Pa! Madame D gave Nanny Zhou a hard backhand slap. Nanny Zhou directly staggered 2 steps and almost fell down. She looked at Madame D in astonishment. As Madame D's confidant, she had never been slapped by Madame D. Moreover, she was still confused and didn't know what had happened. She reached out to cover her old face and looked at Madame D with grievance. She murmured, Madam, what's wrong with you? Your mother's family is Duke Yong's mansion. You can't be estranged from Duke Yong's mansion. I want to go to Duke Yong's mansion. Madame D slightly calmed down at this time. Her lips trembled, and then she slowly gritted her teeth and said. She couldn't bear it anymore. Madam, think about it again. Don't be anxious. What did the general say? I will help you analyze it. One person can't be calculative, but 2 people can be calculative. You have to discuss it again. You can't be impulsive. Duke Yong's mansion is your mother's family. Nanny Zhou didn't care that her face was still painful, and she pulled her and said anxiously. There are cracks on this plate. It's broken. The imperial gift is broken. But it's a big deal. Sister-in-law didn't mention it when she gave it to me. Isn't she trying to make me bear all the responsibility? I really treated her as my sister-in-law. It turns out that in my heart, my Yuru and I are not as good as a cheap niece. This woman wants Di Yan to marry her niece. Madame D gritted her teeth with hatred, but she didn't act so impulsively. How could it be like this? Is Madame D such a person? It was the first time that Nanny Zhou heard about this. She was so scared that her face turned pale and she couldn't even say a word. Nanny Zhou really didn't believe this. But judging from Madame D's actions just now, she knew it was true. For a moment, she didn't know where to start. In the past, she always relied on Duke Yong's mansion. She didn't expect that Countess Yong would secretly plot against Madame D. Let's go. Let's go to Duke Yong's mansion now. I want to find my mother and ask her what she means. Does she really want to kill me and Yuru? Madame D gritted her teeth. She hated Qin Huayong as much as he gave her just now. But before she left, she was called down. Chapter 220. What's going on? Madame D was shocked and rushed out of the room without caring about Nanny Zhou. Madam, someone wants to marry First Miss. The servant girl rushed over and knelt in front of Madame D with a pale face. Who is it? Madame D grabbed the servant girl, lifted her collar and asked anxiously. I don't know. It was said that the commotion was so big that even the general was alarmed. He just took the man to the study. Now the whole mansion is full of people, saying that our young miss has an affair with someone. That man came to the door to ask for young Miss hand in marriage. He also said that he exchanged gifts with young miss. When he was at the door, he took out our mansion's hairpin. The servant girl struggled to take a breath and said with difficulty while holding her collar with both hands. Because she was a little out of breath, her face was slightly pale. Yuru's hairpin. Madame D loosened her hand and staggered. She finally steadied herself. Yes, it said that First Miss gave it to him privately. It said that the hairpin has been in love with First Miss for a long time. Today, he came here to marry First Mississippi. Madam, please think of a way. What should we do? The servant girl could finally take a few breaths and spoke more fluently. Madame D's face turned blue. She felt dizzy and couldn't see anything clearly. Hearing Nanny Zhou's voice, she shook her head and finally came to her senses. Madam, let's go to the general's study. After calming down, Madame D gritted her teeth and immediately strode to the outer yard. Who wanted to hurt Yuru? Of course, she didn't believe that Yuru would have an affair with another man. It was Qin Yuru herself who agreed to marry Di Yan, and she was very satisfied with it. How could she do such a thing again? The matter that Countess Yong sent the cracked plate into the mansion just now still lingered in her mind. At this time, she subconsciously wondered if it was another scheme of Countess Yong, or a scheme of Countess Yong and that woman. She had heard from Nanny Zhou that the niece Countess Yong liked had an ambiguous relationship with Di Yan, which was definitely not the relationship between a cousin and a cousin who abided by etiquette. For this kind of thing, with the previous evidence, it was very likely to lead to the later conjectures. If it was in the past, Madame D would never suspect Countess Yong. But after what had happened before, she felt that Countess Yong was likely to have a hand in it. She couldn't help showing hatred in her eyes. When she found the evidence, she would not let Madame Sure off. After Qin Huayong left in a hurry, Qin Yuru and others could not stay any longer and had to leave Qin Wanru's Jifang pavilion. After everyone left, Qin Wanru asked Yu Jie and Qing Yue to clean up the room. The plate was asked for by Qing Yu from the main kitchen before, and there was no second plate like this. Although the plate that was sent before was from the kitchen, no one knew where Mei Yan found it and put it in. The old maid in charge even said that she had never seen such a plate. However, similar plates could still be found. Although they didn't look like each other, the patterns were similar. It was even harder to identify them after they were broken. As for the brocade, it was not the same as the 2 bolts sent by Rui and Great Elder Princess. At that time, there were so many materials. Qin Wanru did not believe that Qin Yuru could recognize all of them at a glance. Walking to the window, Qin Wanru looked at the pastries that were put away again. She picked up a silver needle and picked it up. A bit of crumbs fell on the needle. She put it to her nose and sniffed it carefully. Then she handed it to Yujie beside her. Yujie took it and sniffed it carefully. "Miss, this pastry is really fragrant. It's different from ordinary pastry. It's especially fragrant because it's added with a kind of fragrance. This kind of thing smells very good and cats and dogs also like it. When I was in Jingshin Monastery, Nun once told me about it. At that time, a rich family came to offer incense, but a cat knocked over their offerings." Regarding the knowledge of medicine, Yujie was even better than Qin Wanru. At this time, she gave a pertinent answer. This answer was within Qin Wanru's expectation. She smiled slightly and sat in front of the chair. "Is the cat sent by Countess Yong?" "It should be. I asked someone to inquire about it. I heard that Countess Yong raised several cats around her. This one doesn't look big. It should be sent to Madame to raise." "Who is raising this cat now?" Qin Wanru said lightly. "It is an old maid of Madame. It is said that she raised a cat at home before. Madame let her raise it now. Madame doesn't like cats and usually doesn't let the cat come close." Yujie said carefully. "Is there a kind of powder that can be hidden in the cat's body, but won't be released unless it is at a specific time?" Qin Wanru lowered her eyes and said slowly. "This seems to be there." Yujie thought for a while and said. "What do you need?" "Write it down later. Next time when you go out, mix it with some common medicinal materials and buy them in the mansion. Especially important medicinal materials, we will buy them ourselves when we go out." Almost in an instant, Qin Wanru had an idea. "Yes, I will write it down right now." Yujie answered and left. Nanny Yu rushed in and said, "Second miss, there is a man at the door making a fuss. He said that he wants to marry first miss because of their friendship." "Just came." Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows. It was better to come at the right time than to come early. What a coincidence. She had just planted the seed of doubt in Madame D's heart, and now there was fertile soil for it to grow. "Yes, they are making a fuss now. I happened to go out for something and happened to see that the door of our mansion was surrounded by people. They were all pointing at our mansion." Nanny Yu frowned and said. She was not worried about Qin Yuru, but she was afraid that it would affect Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to the dressing table and sat down. "Qin Yu, come over and help me freshen up. Father will definitely ask me to go over later." Qin Yu came over obediently and helped Dong Wanru put down her hair bun and combed it again. "Why? Isn't this first Mrs. matter? Why does it have anything to do with second miss?" Nanny Yu said anxiously as she followed Qin Wanru to the mirror. "Although it has nothing to do with me, since the word Qin is written on this hairpin, Madame D should let me step into the muddy water." Qin Wanru said slowly. "Madame D wants to push the blame to you again?" Nanny Yu was shocked and her face changed. She paced around the room twice before she stopped. "Miss, what should we do now? We can't just wait for death." Madame D had no bottom line in Jiangzhou, and Nanny Yu was still frightened until now. Now that she heard that it was Madame D who made trouble again, she immediately panicked. "Don't worry, Nanny. I will be fine. How about the thing that I asked Wang Feng to inquire about?" Qin Wanru said unhurriedly. Looking at the girl in the mirror who had combed her hair bun again, she slightly raised the corner of her mouth and smiled. Perhaps her calm attitude affected Nanny Yu. Nanny Yu calmed down and took a deep breath before she said, "The people from Madame Shui's ex-husband's family have been found. They actually came to the capital city, but they didn't do anything. They should be waiting for the most suitable opportunity to take action. Who let them come to the capital city? It's Madame's servants. When we were in Jiangzhou, we had already sent someone to inform them. After we entered the capital city, they also got up at about the same time. Nanny Yu reported. She just hurried out because of this matter. Her son told her that there was some progress in the matter. Qin Wanru had no doubt that it was Madame D's people who brought the people from Shui Rulan's ex-husband's family here. This was also the reason why she asked Wang Feng to find those two people so quickly. They could investigate the people brought from Jiangzhou these days. There would not be many people. Then they could keep an eye on the people around Madame D. Who are they? I heard that they are Madame Shui's ex-husband's younger brother and sister-in-law. When Madame Shui's husband died, they treated Madame Shui very badly. They mistreated Madame Shui together with the mother-in-law of that family. After old grandma knew about it, she took Madame Shui back to live. Nanny Yu had been in the mansion for a long time, so she naturally knew about Shui Rulan. Speaking of Shui Rulan, she did have a hard life. This marriage was also set long ago. It was said that it was set when Shui Rulan's birth mother was still alive. Later, Shui Rulan's birth mother passed away. In fact, the other side did not want to recognize this marriage. Later, because of Qin Huayong's identity, the other side proposed to Shui Rulan again. Unexpectedly, Shui Rulan's ex-husband died only half a year after they were married. After that, her life in that family was extremely difficult. That family even spread rumors that she was a jinx to her husband. There were a lot of ominous rumors. That was why old grandma was so angry that she brought Shui Rulan back to Qin's mansion. Didn't that family say that mother was free to marry? How dare they come here now? Qin Wanru said coldly. I guess they want to extort some money. This kind of people are very shameless. Previously, they said that Madame Shui could do whatever she wanted. As long as Madame Shui went back, they could even share their property. Now they come out, they just want to extort some benefits from Madame Shui. Except for the young master who died, there is no good character in this family. Nanny Yu said angrily. At that time, she went to pick up Shui Rulan with several people in the mansion. When she saw that Shui Rulan was so skinny that she looked like a skeleton, she was so angry that she almost quarreled with the people in the mansion. A beautiful girl had been tortured to the point that she didn't even look like a human half a year after marrying into the family. Any family would feel sorry for her. Nanny Yu had never seen such a harsh and heartless family before. Ask Wang Feng to keep an eye on them. If there is anything unusual, report to me immediately. But there should be nothing for the time being. Recently, Madame has no time. Qin Wanru lowered her eyes, and her butterfly-like long eyelashes fluttered twice. Recently, there were many things, and Madame D was busy for a while. Originally, her mother and herself were her biggest enemies. After what happened today, Madame D now hated not only her mother and herself the most. Based on Madame D's character, she did not look like a person who would suffer losses. Second miss, the general invites you to the study. Suddenly, there came the voice of a servant girl at the door. Chapter 221. When Qin Wanru arrived at the study, she was led in by a servant through the side door. She was faced with a screen and Qin Yuru was sitting behind it, gnashing her teeth. The manservant pointed to another chair, indicating for her to sit there. Qin Wanru nodded silently and sat in front of the chair. Qin Yuru glared at her fiercely and continued to listen to the movements behind the screen. You said that this hairpin belongs to my cousin. Do you have any proof? Qin Wanru listened carefully and heard Di Yan's voice first. A trace of deepness flashed in her watery eyes. Di Yan seemed to be increasingly dissatisfied with Qin Yuru, otherwise he would not have intervened here at this time. At this time, even if Di Yan was full of doubts, he had to avoid it. Directly coming to the study and intervening in this matter showed his impoliteness, or it could be said that his dissatisfaction with Chin Yuru was already written on his face. Young master, first Miss Chin and I love each other at first sight. Since we met, we have been giving each other hairpins. If you don't believe me, you can check with first Miss Chin. I have given her a hairpin passed down from my ancestors. Although I am now poor, the hairpins passed down from my ancestors are 100% good. Kneeling in the study was a thin man. Although he was young, his eyes looked a little wretched when he rolled them. He had already been beaten up by Qin Huayong earlier, and his face was covered in bruises. However, this did not stop him from continuing to bite Qin Huayong to death. Nonsense. Qin Yuru could not bear to listen to him anymore. She suddenly stood up and walked out with a livid face. She walked to the man and gave him a hard kick. At the sight of Qin Yuru, the man immediately shouted, "First miss, you accepted my token of love and gave me an ordinary hairpin as a token of love. Then you disappeared. If I did not come to you today, you would not recognize me, right? That hairpin is passed down from my ancestors. Our ancestors were also officials. This hairpin is the most valuable thing left by our ancestors. Bastard." Seeing that the man was getting more and more ridiculous, Qin Huayong was so angry that he picked up the glass beside him and smashed it at the man's head. The man cried out in pain and held his head tightly as he wailed. "Cousin, go and see if you have this hairpin. If you do, return it to him. This kind of person is not worth it." Di Yen said with a frown. "Cousin, what do you mean? You mean I have this hairpin? I took this man's hairpin. Is what happened between us true?" Qin Yuru couldn't help crying. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and said with hatred, "I'm not saying that you have this hairpin. It's not worth it for this kind of person. He's just a local ruffian. It's not good if things get out of hand." Di Yen said in a low voice. "How can you be sure it's me? I've never seen this person before. That hairpin is from Qin's mansion. I'm not the only one in Qin's mansion who has a hairpin. Can't my second sister have it? You can't give it to an outsider in my name." Although Qin Yuru hated Di Yen for saying this at this time, she still accused Qin Wanru under Madame Di's hint. "Where did you come from? How dare you frame an official's daughter? Do you want to die?" Madame Di said sinisterly. At this time, she also hated in her heart. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have used that woman to frame Qin Wanru. She didn't expect that it was her own daughter who was being framed. When she saw this hairpin, she understood everything. The reason why she had played the role of Dong Xiu'er was to get this hairpin from Dong Xiu'er. Of course, her purpose was to ruin Qin Wanru's reputation. The hairpin was taken from Dong Xiu'er. In order to get rid of the crime, it was very likely that Dong Xiu'er would push the blame onto Qin Wanru. With Dong Xiu'er's temperament and the fact that she had never left Jifang Pavilion, if she really said so, there would be people who would believe her. Moreover, she had some specious evidence, and this matter would be considered a success. Unexpectedly, this matter fell on Qin Yuru. At this time, Madame Di couldn't wait to tear Ning Kaisian into pieces. How could she not know who was behind this matter? That bitch, how dare she do this? She looked at Di Yen suspiciously. Originally, she liked this nephew very much, but now he was not pleasing to the eye no matter how she looked at him. He was not only dissolute, but also had an ambiguous relationship with Ning Kaisian, the bitch. Of course, Countess Yong was the one who pulled the strings. Both of them were not good people. If she had known this, she would have made this woman's reputation worse. Madame Di was resentful and aggrieved. She knew the truth of this matter, but she couldn't say it. She could only hint that this matter had something to do with Qin Wanru, which made Qin Huayong call Qin Wanru over. "Madam, First Miss and I are really in love with each other. Please don't break us up." At first glance, this person was obviously stubborn. After hearing Qin Yuru and Madame Di's words, he still refused to give up. My daughter has been engaged with my nephew for a long time. She will be the future wife of the heir of Duke Yong. How can you compare with my daughter? How dare you say that my daughter and my daughter are in love with each other? Madame D was so angry that she trembled all over. She pointed at Di Yan and said angrily, "Although my family background is not as good as the heir of Duke Yong, my ancestors are also famous. In addition, I am very good to First Miss Qin. When we are together, we have already had skin contact. Otherwise, I would not have given her such a precious hairpin. First Miss Qin said that she likes people like me, so I have no choice." A scoundrel was a scoundrel. At this time, of course, he could say anything. His words made Qin Yuru's face turn red. She almost couldn't breathe. She reached out to hold Mei Shui's shoulder and was about to give this person another hard kick. However, this man was already prepared. When he saw Qin Yuru was about to lift her leg again, he reached out to hold Qin Yuru's leg and pulled it hard. Qin Yuru lost her footing and fell down, coincidentally falling on this man. The man hurriedly let go of Qin Yuru's leg and reached out to hold Qin Yuru. His face was full of joy. "Yuru, I know that you are sincere to me. When we met in private before, you said that you would soon give birth to a big fat son for me. You said that you might be pregnant. You should be careful now." It happened so suddenly that Madame D and Di Yan did not notice that Qin Yuru had already fallen into the man's arms. Madame D reacted quickly. She grabbed Qin Yuru with one hand and slapped the man with the other. Nanny Zhou, who was standing beside her, reacted quickly as well. She helped Madame D pull Qin Yuru away. Then, she lifted her leg and kicked the man hard. Madame D was stunned. The man's hand loosened after being slapped, and Qin Yuru was pulled away. Di Yan's face turned green. His fingers trembled and he wanted to say something. However, when he saw Qin Huayong's cold face, he did not dare to say anything. In such a situation, even if what happened before was fake, Qin Yuru's reputation would be tarnished. Di Yan deeply felt that he had been cheated on. "If you don't believe me, go to First Miss Qin's room and check. You will definitely find that hairpin. There is a small character on such an exquisite hairpin, Dai. First Miss of your mansion's surname is Qin, and there is no such character in her name. Naturally, it was given to her by me." The man covered his chest and said confidently, "Someone, go and find it." Qin Huayong was so angry that he felt dizzy. He had been a general for many years, and his words were the law in Jiangzhou. He had never encountered such a thing. A servant turned around and was about to go downstairs. Qin Yuru's face changed dramatically. She did not care to look for the man anymore. She reached out and grabbed Madame D tightly. She said in panic, "Mother." Madame D reached out and patted Qin Yuru's hand. She hinted at Nanny Zhou with her eyes. Nanny Zhou understood and hurriedly followed the servant down. Although Madame D felt that this was very whimsical, it was obvious that Qin Yuru had a guilty conscience. To be on the safe side, of course, Nanny Zhou followed. Di Yan saw the interaction between Qin Yuru and Madame D in panic, and his face darkened. He also gave his servant a look, and the servant quietly retreated from the side door and ran out of the door to chase after the figure in front of him. "You, how dare you slander my daughter? She is not the only miss in this mansion. You have seen clearly." At this time, Madame D was still trying to lead the matter to Qin Wanru. Qin Huayong, who was sitting on the chair, was so angry that he slammed the table hard, making a loud noise. For a moment, the room became quiet. "Father, send him to the magistrate." Qin Wanru came out from behind the screen and said with a calm look. Hearing that she was going to send him to the government office, the man showed some panic for the first time on his face, but he immediately became tough. "No matter where I go, First Miss Qin is mine. Our relationship is not that of a fiancé. Now we may even have a child. In the future, we will be a family. If you send me to the government office, the child will be born without a father. Father, since he is so stubborn, we should investigate him. First, investigate his identity, and then ask him who he is close to recently, and find out who is trying to frame us, Qin Wanru said calmly. Qin Wanru said calmly. She turned around and walked to Qin Huayong, but she didn't stop when she walked past Qin Huayong. Why send him to the magistrate? Ask him first. Madame D panicked, afraid that more things would happen. Seeing that Madame D was guilty, the man's panicked face immediately became arrogant, and he said loudly, "Your mansion's miss and I are really in love with each other. Even if I send him to the magistrate, I will still say so. If you don't want first Miss's reputation, I don't care. Anyway, it's not like I can't tell others about what happened between me and your mansion's miss." Previously, the man told him that it was impossible for anything to happen. No miss would dare to do something like this, and now the evidence was conclusive. The man looked at Qin Yuru proudly, and his eyes were full of lust. Such a beautiful miss from an aristocratic family was going to be his. Just thinking about it made him happy. Chapter 222. Qin Huayong was a general. Unlike the other generals in the study, there was a sword hanging on the wall behind him. When Qin Wanru just walked over, she took down the sword from the wall, walked over and put it on the man's neck. Feeling the coldness on his neck and the dazzling cold light of the sharp blade in front of him, the man stiffened. "Father, I don't know who ordered this little thief to deliberately make trouble in our mansion with the excuse of Big Sister's lost hairpin. He wanted to assassinate you. Father accidentally killed him. It's not a big deal, is it?" Qin Wanru looked back and smiled like a blooming flower. She was elegant and beautiful, which formed a sharp contrast with Qin Yuru, who was flustered and exasperated but helpless. Qin Huayong understood and nodded. "I killed him. He's just a little thief." "Father, you can not only kill him, but also kill his whole family. Although he seems to be alone, he must have his whole family. Of course, you can also dig up the graves of his dead relatives and scatter their ashes." Qin Wanru's smile became softer and she even glanced at the man. Being stared at by her, the man felt as if his heart had been gripped by a strange hand. In his eyes, there was only a deep sense of fear and trepidation. It was as if something had gripped his heart, causing him to tremble in fear. Indeed, both his parents died and he was just a ruffian. But he still had an aunt who loved him and raised him since he was a child. He also treated her as his own mother. "Me. Miss, it's a little late to say it now." Qin Wanru interrupted his trembling words and slightly tightened her grip. The man only felt a chill on his neck and immediately screamed in shock. Miss, I'll say it all. Someone asked me to kill First Mississippi, but I don't want to know. Your life, the lives of your whole family, and your parents can't live in peace in the underworld. Isn't it better? You're really brave for a little money." Qin Wanru said with a pitiful look. Then she looked down at the tip of her sword. The sword was so sharp that it cut the man's neck, and blood slid down. Di Yan couldn't help taking a step back. He looked at Qin Wanru in disbelief with a pale face. Was this really the Qin Wanru who looked delicate in the past? Recently, when Di Yan saw Qin Wanru, he always liked to look at her. Qin Wanru, who gradually showed the traces of a young girl, was no longer an inconspicuous child. Anyone could imagine her beauty in the future. However, right now, she was actually holding a sharp sword without batting an eyelid. The tip of the sword was dripping with blood, reflecting a strange coldness on her face. Di Yan didn't dare to think about anything else. He hurriedly lowered his head to hide the panic in his eyes. He had seen many women in his life. Some were beautiful, some were delicate, some were pitiful, and some were fierce. However, he had never seen a woman with such a beautiful smile and such ruthless actions. Even if there was still some charm in his heart, it all disappeared at this moment. Second miss, it was the people of Ning's mansion who asked them to do this. It really has nothing to do with me. The hairpin was also given to me by the people of Ning's mansion. The supervisor thought that he went around in circles, and I didn't know about it. I also have someone in this area, and I followed him into Ning's mansion. After that, I saw the supervisor go in and out of Ning's mansion several times. With the sword on his neck and Qin Wanru's previous words, the man trembled all over. He was afraid that Qin Wanru couldn't control herself and would kill him. He was so anxious that he blurted out everything. At this time, he didn't dare to hide anything. The reason why he followed the steward who ordered him to do this was to see who ordered him to do this. A ruffian like him wouldn't be able to live well if he wasn't cautious. When he found that the supervisor was from Ning's mansion, the ruffian didn't go to him directly. He wanted to extort money from the supervisor after the matter of Ning Yuan army general's mansion was settled, and then he could get money from both sides. However, it seemed that he was about to lose his life. The ruffian didn't dare to hide anything anymore. Not to mention that he would answer whatever was asked. Even if she didn't ask, he would answer in a hurry, for fear of accidentally angering Qin Wanru. The reason that Qin Wanru said before was completely reasonable. It was normal to assassinate an imperial court official, be killed on the spot, and then have his whole family executed. Ning's mansion? Which Ning's mansion? Ning Caishian's Ning's mansion. Qin Yuru suddenly understood. She suddenly rushed over, grabbed the man's neck, and screamed. Qin Wanru loosened her grip and the sword was released from the man's neck. If Qin Yuru rushed over recklessly, the man would be hit by the sword. She was just trying to scare the man. If she really did what she said, it would take more than a few words from the Qin's mansion. Of course, if something really happened and the man was killed on the spot, it had nothing to do with Qin Yuru, because she was the one who held the sword. At this time, Qin Yuru still wanted to push the blame to her. Qin Wanru slightly sneered and glanced at Qin Yuru's face. Of course, she didn't do this to help Qin Yuru. If they fought each other, then Duke Yong's mansion could not take care of themselves and could not interfere in the affairs of Qin's mansion at will. With Duke Xing's mansion eyeing them covetously, they should kill their claws and teeth first. She took 2 steps back, turned around, and walked to Qin Huayong. Then she respectfully handed the sword to Qin Huayong, and then stood behind Qin Huayong calmly. Qin Huayong's eyes fell on the tip of the sword in his hand, and blood fell from the tip. He raised his head and looked at Qin Yuru, who seemed to have the upper hand at this time, and was disappointed. Why? Wasn't this his biological daughter? Why was his biological daughter not like this? Qin Wanru was a brave girl from a family of generals, but not Qin Yuru, who not only did not help the situation, but also made things more messy. If Qin Yuru was like Wanru, he would not have to worry so much, or Wanru was really his biological daughter. How good it would be. Yes, it's the Ning's mansion with an extremely bad reputation. I heard that the first miss in the mansion has an ambiguous relationship with an heir, and the relationship between them has been unclear for a long time. And the second miss also has that kind of ambiguous relationship with another child from an aristocratic family. Of course, the ruffian said everything at this time. He was afraid that Qin Yuru did not understand, so he explained a few more words. Di Yan's face changed from blue to white. Of course, he also knew whose mansion this so-called Ning's mansion belonged to, and for a moment, he felt ashamed and resentful. He only felt that he had been disgraced by Ning Kaixian and Qin Yuru. Father, I'm going to bring people to smash that bitch's mansion and tear her mouth. Let's see if she dares to do this in the future. Qin Yuru turned to look at Qin Huayong and screamed. She had been suppressed before, and it was not easy for her to figure out the truth. How could she let it go? She stared at Di Yan fiercely. She would not forget that this matter had something to do with Di Yan. Father, report it to the government and arrest Miss Ning. It is also a crime to frame an official's family, Qin Wanru added unhurriedly. Uncle-in-law, please wait. Di Yan thought it was true and became anxious. Wait for what? Wait for what? Could it be that you have something to do with her? Qin Yuru was mad with anger. She was as angry as she was before. She turned her head and stared at Di Yan, gnashing her teeth. She did not care that she was in front of others and shouted at Di Yan. She shouted at him. Qin Yuru, what's wrong with you? What does this have to do with me? Di Yan was also anxious. It doesn't matter. She will find her way here and get someone to ruin my reputation. Tell me, are you still in cahoots with them? Di Yan, don't forget that I'm only engaged to you now. Qin Yuru said with hatred. All the concerns that had been suppressed in her heart before suddenly came out. Qin Yuru's eyes were filled with hatred. Some words could not be held back. Qin Yuru, what are you talking about? Do you know what you are talking about? Di Yan felt that he had lost all his face. For a moment, he felt a little guilty and angry, so he could only shout louder. Di Yan, have you always disliked me and didn't want to be engaged to me? You have been delaying this marriage until you could not delay it any longer because of this woman. Well, I will go to Ning's mansion later and drag this woman to the street. I will let people see how this shameless woman seduces you. Not only did Di Yan not comfort her, but he also kept shouting at her. The anger and grievance in Qin Yuru's heart suddenly rushed out. If it were not for Duke Yong's mansion's delay in responding, she would not have chosen Qi Tianyu, would not have plotted against Qin Wanru, and would not have lost her reputation in Jiangzhou, so that everyone in Jiangzhou would laugh at her. She had done so much for Di Yan. Not only was Di Yan not grateful, but he also had an ambiguous relationship with another woman and even caused that woman to ruin her reputation. The so-called new hatred and old hatred were nothing. Qin Yuru was so angry that her eyes turned red. She stepped forward and grabbed Di Yan's sleeve, demanding an explanation from him. These words resonated with Madame Di, and she stared at Di Yan coldly. Di Yan fiercely swung his sleeve, bowed to Qin Huayong with a livid face, and then turned to leave. He felt that Qin Yuru was too simple and unreasonable. Seeing him swinging his sleeve and leaving, Madame Di's face became more and more gloomy. She had some doubts before, but now she was sure. Di Yan respected his aunt so much that he would bow to her when he saw her. But now he ignored her and left. It must be Madame Shi who taught him to do this. Everything in front of her was also Madame Shi's instigation. Otherwise, how could that bitch have the courage to ruin Yuru's reputation? General, you must seek justice for Yuru. Madame Di covered her sleeves and burst into tears to hide the hatred in her eyes. Well, don't cry. Guards, take them out and send them to prison. Looking at the mess in the study, Qin Huayong frowned and said sternly. After being shouted at by him, both Madame Di and Qin Yuru could not help but stop crying with red eyes. 2 guards came in from outside. Regardless of how the man struggled, they knocked him out with a slap and dragged him out like a dead dog. Chapter 223. Qin Wanru followed Qin Huayong out. When she walked out of the room, she saw Qin Yuru crying on Madame Di, whose face was livid and her body was trembling. A servant fell to the ground. It was the servant sent by Qin Huayong. Mei Shui knelt on the ground and asked for forgiveness. It was obvious that she had been beaten by Qin Yuru and one side of her face was swollen. What happened? Qin Huayong asked sharply. General, I want to go to Duke Yong's mansion. Before the servant could speak, Madame Di screamed. What are you going to do at this time? Qin Huayong frowned and asked coldly. I want to ask Madame Shi what she is thinking. She tried to hurt me and Yuru again and again. Now she even colluded with that woman to do this kind of thing. I have always trusted her. What is she thinking? Madame Di was so angry that she didn't call Countess Yong's sister-in-law, but directly used her surname. The cause and effect and all the things were strung together. At this time, Madame Di felt that Countess Yong was involved in all the things. Of course, The purpose was to marry the niece of Ning's mansion. Madame D didn't want her daughter to marry into Duke Yong's mansion. How could she bear it? Off you go. Qin Huayong thought for a while and didn't stop her. He warned her with a cold face, think carefully about what you are going to say. I know. Madame D said with hatred. She patted Qin Yuru to comfort her and then pushed her away. She couldn't hide the anger on her face and turned to leave. Qin Huayong looked at Madame D's back thoughtfully. A trace of darkness flashed in his eyes. Then he turned to look at the servant who just got up and asked in a low voice, "What happened?" "General, I went to check first Mrs. Things and found the hairpin. Then I brought it here for you to check. I didn't expect to meet the heir of the Duke coming out. The heir of the Duke and his servant snatched the hairpin from my hand and knocked me over. On the ground." The servant said anxiously. "Is there really a hairpin?" Qin Huayong turned to Qin Yuru with cold eyes. I don't know." Qin Yuru panicked and stammered. She was not confident when Madame D was not here. She looked around and it was obvious that she was guilty. "Are you going to tell me or not?" Qin Huayong said coldly. His eyes were sharp. "If you don't say it, then never speak of this matter again." Since it had happened and the hairpin had been taken away by Di Yan, even if Qin Yuru didn't want to say anything, she would be forced to say it in the end. However, Qin Yuru couldn't explain it clearly because she picked up the hairpin on the road. Qin Wanru thought about it calmly and her eyes fell on Qin Yuru's panicked face. If his father said so, he would definitely do so. This was actually a warning to Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru seemed to realize something and suddenly screamed, "Father, how can you do this to me? I'm your biological daughter." Qin Huayong's face was very gloomy as he said in a stern voice, "What nonsense are you talking about? Someone, take the young miss away and keep an eye on her." The two old maids on the side looked at her and finally stepped forward with a little timidity to pull Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru suddenly shook off the hands of the two old maids and cried again, "Father, father, how can you be so partial? I'm your biological daughter. Isn't Wanru my daughter? Just because she's not your mother's child, you don't recognize Wanru? Yuru, I always thought that you were different from your mother. Although you made a mistake, at least you were kind and wouldn't be provoked to do those evil things. But I didn't expect you to be so stupid. I don't know who deceived you." Qin Huayong's words were harsh and his face was extremely gloomy. Qin Yuru had never seen Qin Huayong treat her like this. Her face turned pale and she said, "Father, it must be second sister who said something in front of you. I've never done anything wrong. It's just because second sister has bad intentions. As for the fact that second sister is not your biological daughter, the whole mansion knows it. I'm not the only one who said it. The whole mansion is talking about it." "Who is talking about it?" Qin Huayong suddenly raised his voice and his expression became more and more severe. "If you listen to Countess Yong's nonsense again, I'll directly lock you in the nunnery, lest you don't know people well and do stupid things all day long. Look at Countess Yong, I know she doesn't want to marry you." "Father!" Qin Yuru cried. "Get out of here!" Qin Huayong shouted without pity. The two old maids hurried to pull Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru glared at Qin Wanru with red eyes, turned around and ran away with tears covering her face. She hated Qin Wanru to death. She was the biological child, but her father was so protective of a bastard. Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Yuru indifferently. A trace of strangeness flashed in her eyes. Mei Shui hurriedly got up from the ground, bowed to Qin Huayong, and hurried to catch up. "Father, am I really not your biological daughter?" Qin Wanru's voice came from behind Qin Huayong, with a bit of sadness. "Of course you are my biological daughter. How could you not be? Madame D is narrow-minded, and raised your big sister like this." Qin Huayong turned his head and his eyes fell on Qin Wanru gently. He reached out his hand and seemed to want to touch her head, just like when she was very young. In Qin Wanru's memory, Qin Huayong would occasionally touch her head gently, but this memory was so long ago that she almost forgot it. She looked up subconsciously and saw Qin Huayong's hand stiffen in front of her head, and his expression was a bit stiff. Then she saw his hand slowly fall down, but it was not the top of her head. "Father." Qin Wanru blinked and said with a little surprise. "You are a good girl. Your big sister thinks wrong. No matter what, you are sisters, and blood is thicker than water." Qin Huayong's hand fell down, and he seemed to suddenly become a lot older. He sighed deeply and said, "I am old. You sisters should support each other in the future. Your big sister is now bewitched by Countess Yong. Is Madame D going to find Countess Yong now? Will Duke Yong's mansion break off the engagement with our mansion?" Qin Wanru did not ask about the previous matter, but curiously changed the topic. This made Qin Huayong secretly heave a sigh of relief, and his expression returned to normal. "They will not break off the engagement with us." He raised his head and looked in the direction of Duke Yong's mansion. Duke Yong's mansion is not the Duke Yong's mansion in the past. He did not say much, but Qin Wanru had understood the meaning of Qin Huayong's words. In the past, Qin Huayong looked down on Qin Yuru, and then immediately fixed the marriage with Qin Yuru. Although the matter of Ning Kaisian broke out, the real reason was actually her father's official position. Not everyone could bear the responsibility of a military officer with real power. In the last life, her father's official position after entering the capital city was even lower than that in this life, but Duke Yong's mansion still married Qin's mansion. Although Countess Yong always seemed to like Ning Kaisian and did not want Qin Yuru to be her daughter-in-law, she finally compromised and married Qin Yuru. From this, it could be seen that the real strength of Duke Yong's mansion had already been weakened. It was just maintaining the dignity of an aristocratic family on the surface. With Countess Yong's temperament, she even liked Ning Kaisian, the daughter of a declining aristocratic family, which had already explained everything. Later, what she did by relying on Madame of Duke Xing, all showed that Duke Yong's mansion was only beautiful on the surface. After thinking about this, Qin Wanru slightly lowered her head to hide the deep and gloomy look in her eyes. When she raised her head again, she still looked like a beautiful girl. The hairpin fell into the hands of heir of Duke Yong. "Is it okay for big sister?" "It's okay. Di Yan is not upright. Even if he got the hairpin, so what?" Qin Huayong actually despised Di Yan, the playboy. In his opinion, he would rather look down on Qi Tianyu than Di Yan. But at that time, because Madame D took advantage of Shui Rulan and because of some hesitation in his heart, this matter had come to this point. Every time he thought of this, Qin Huayong's face darkened. In fact, there were some things that he had been hesitating about. Duke Yong's mansion was not a good match, but now it seemed that Qin Yuru only had this best choice. "It's okay." Qin Wanru smiled slightly and seemed to be relieved. After bowing to Qin Huayong, she left. Seeing Qin Wanru turn and leave with Yujie, Qin Huayong stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at her little back with unclear eyes and sighed for a long time. "Miss, the hairpin has been taken away by child D. Is it really okay?" After leaving the garden of the study, Yujie lowered her voice and asked. In her opinion, this hairpin was like a stain on Qin Yuru's reputation, and it was a stain that could not be explained clearly. How could it fall into the hands of the angry Di Yan so easily? Di Yan is very angry, so is Madame D. And about the plate, my father must have reprimanded Madame D. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said without looking back. There seemed to be a faint feeling of peeping at her back. She keenly sensed that Qin Huayong was looking at her, so she bit her lip and suppressed the trace of strangeness in her heart. She must be thinking too much. Is Madame D going to Duke Yong's mansion to make trouble? Yujie blinked her eyes and suddenly laughed. That's great. This Countess Yong is not a good person at first sight. She has been making trouble behind Madame D and First Mississippi. She is really annoying. Now it depends on how she will counterattack. Qin Wanru's eyes became cold. The next person to be dragged out was Madam of Duke Xing. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.